Hello, everyone, and welcome to some more Big Brother 24 postseason coverage. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, here for RHAP as a podcast, of course, and with me today, a new competition record holder and tire. It's Michael. How you doing, Michael?
Hi, good, doing well. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Very excited to talk with you. We're gonna talk through Michael's game through Big Brother 24. Ask some questions, and I don't know. Maybe I should have come with a challenge that we could compete.
Oh, that's okay. I'm resting. I've used it all up, so recharging.
This must be very far from what you expected coming into Big Brother to come out and be like the challenge beast. Because I know you said it on the feeds. This is not the game you wanted to play.
Yep. Yeah, I wanted to go in and play, like really focus on the social and strategy aspect. And then, I don't know, I kept winning. And I was like, well, now that I've won, I've got to keep winning because I always said I would rather be taken out for being too big of a threat than throw something. And then that's the week I go home and then be like, oh, if I had just tried. So, it is what it is. Definitely not the game I wanted to play, but it was still a lot of fun. And I have some regrets, but because I lost, but
Yeah.
so I can't say no regrets, but
Well, we do need to, I think, talk about the week one. You said, what would Janelle do? And then you did that.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was putting out there into the universe, but I guess
You kind of did it to yourself a little bit.
Yep, I sure did.
Yeah. All right. Michael, you came into the game. You were obviously a big fan in your preseason sort of like package, or I guess not preseason, your like intro package for the first episode. You had like a notebook with stats. You talked about how winning the first HOH, I think was the thing that you said,
Yeah.
was good. Tell me about this. Tell me about your fandom of Big Brother. When did you get into it, and when did you put together all these stats?
Yeah, so I started watching Big Brother when I was 8. It was season 3 was the first season I ever watched. I don't think I fully understood everything that was going on, but I was like, oh, they're playing these fun games. Like, this is fun. And it was funny. And I talked about this in casting a lot. Like, my parents like saw me watching it once and they were like, this is inappropriate. Like, men and women are sleeping in the same beds. Like, no, you can't watch it. So I'd have to watch it in secret after that. So they wouldn't catch me, or I would like watch it with like the volume like all the way down so they couldn't hear it from the other room. But yeah, so I've been watching for a very long time. It wasn't until recently that I started like compiling stuff and kind of as I've gotten more into it and more in the strategy, because I'll think of things that I've like for example, like like the knockout comp where you put 2 people up. It's like I'll notice like, oh, the person who was like the last to be put up, they usually seem to do well. I wonder what the history of that is, and I go back and watch them all and like take my notes. And so I don't know, I'm a nerd, I own it, and it infiltrates every part of my life. And Big Brother too is like, I need to know all these stats and statistics.
Yeah. I mean, we had done a podcast on the winner of the first HOH being getting an advantage at the very least, having an advantage, especially to win the game.
Yep.
We had always looked, or the way that we looked at it in the podcast was the key to like obtaining that advantage, or at the very least, a correlation between like a successful first HOH and a non-successful first HOH, of course, is like being on the right side of that first vote, sort of like being in control of that first HOH. Something that I think the last couple of first HOHs weren't really on top of here in different ways. But you came into the game. Did you have a lot of like plans? Did you think like this is what I'm going to do, or did you kind of just go in thinking I'll just kind of see what I'm dealing with and go from there?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. I went in really wanting to win the first HOH because, and I learned now, like from living that first week, just exactly why, it is so hard to get people one-on-one to have game talks that first week because there are 16 people in this house. As big as it is, like it's not that big, especially when you don't have access to the backyard. And everyone is so afraid of being left out that they're like following each other from room to room. So being HOH gives you an opportunity because everyone expects that you're going to have these one-on-ones. So you have a reason to talk to every single person individually. It's not sketchy. It's not shady because you have to do it. You're HOH. So I really wanted to win the first HOH. Unfortunately, Unfortunately and fortunately, I didn't. Obviously, Daniel had to put up a bunch of people and none of us went home. So I guess looking back, it's good that I didn't win it. But in the moment, I was disappointed. But so that was my week one, my big thing. I was like, this is the one plan that I have. I'm going to try for that HOH. And also because a lot of times the easy out for the first HOH, which Pooch used, is, the first people out of the comp, I'll put them up because you were the first ones out. I have no reason to put anyone up. So I was like, okay, at least if I try and I don't win, hopefully that'll keep me off, from any easy decision like that. So that was my first thought. Other than that, I just wanted to go in and be adaptable. I was like, we have no idea what twists we're going to be thrown or have thrown our way. Talk to people, be social, which I didn't do as good of a job as I would have liked. Everyone was like, you were so quiet. I was like, I felt like I was talking. I think I'm just not like a big group type of person. But those were really my only plans going in because I was like, you never know what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, Big Brother is a social game. So, you can always plan on, I'm going to talk to people and be nice and try to be likable.
In that first competition, you were hanging, and you came in second place to Daniel. Do you think you were close to beating it? Do you think it was a close one, or were you like completely gassed? There was no way.
I don't know. Daniel afterwards said that he was pretty close to dropping. I don't know if that's true or not, or if he was trying to downplay it. I gave it everything that I had. I look at me, like I do not have upper body strength, like my grip strength, my hands were just slipping off the bar. So I gave it everything I had. I don't know how much longer Daniel had in him, but I don't think I was going to win that one. And when I heard the rules for the comp, I'm like, oh no, like just don't be the first one off. And so luckily I wasn't, but I maybe that was my problem. Maybe I counted myself out before it even started, but I knew that was not my comp.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, first couple of days, there was, you were coming in, you were one of, I think, the favorites and of the fan base in the preseason. People were like watching out, like, okay, super fan Michael, what is he gonna do?
Which is wild to me because as a super fan, I know that we tear other super fans to shreds. Like if you get one thing wrong, we're like, you're not a true super, and so I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm probably being ripped to shreds right now because I misspoke or misremembered something. But so afterwards to find out the reception, I'm like, oh, like that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, to be fair, in the other interviews, we were hearing about Cody, California, and other various things. So, I think how it usually goes is the people like the idea of a super fan, and then the reality of it is the second you don't live up to like the perfect standard, you go down. So that preseason portion is the best place to be. Just exist be like Marvin, exist in the preseason and then just don't show up. You're golden. So it did seem like you were a little quiet. That was one of the storylines in the first few days from like people watching the feeds, was that they're like, what is we need Michael to be talking to more people. You did have a couple of conversations with Daniel, but it seemed like just right away he talked about you as just like a person that he was keeping an eye on. And then over the next like day or two, it went from like keeping an eye on him to definitely got to go up as a pawn to definitely got to be my target. And throughout it all, it didn't seem like you were doing anything specific to sort of like get that target onto you from him. You were talking to him, you were having conversations, you were offering him things. It just seemed like nothing was landing. What was that like from your perspective?
Yeah, it was odd because I knew that nominations were going to come faster than people expected because I watched the show in the feed. So like, and nobody, at least night one, I don't think there was any game talk that I was aware of. Day two, I'm like, okay, maybe it's kind of starting. But Daniel, like, didn't say, like, when, we're all in his HOH room, like, oh, like, I want to talk to everyone or anything like that. So he didn't really, like, no one was going up and having one-on-ones with him. And I remember talking to him on day two. I was like, hey, like, I don't want to be the person to like start like or stir anything up, but like, have you thought about like conversations? Just because like, nominations are going to happen. And I was like, and I would love to have a one-on-one with you, like, when you get a chance. And he was like, oh yeah. And then leaves the room. And so then eventually I get up there for a one-on-one. And I think I was the first person to talk to him one-on-one actually. And I don't know, in my head, I felt like I had like a good pitch. Like, you always tell the first HOH, if you keep me safe, like I will return the favor. And I think I even extended it. I was like, obviously like it means a lot for me to be here. If you kept me safe this first week, I wouldn't forget that. And like, even extending beyond next week, like if I'm HOH in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like I wouldn't put you up, like, because like, going home first, like that's everyone's worst nightmare or whatever. And he seemed really receptive and he was like, yeah, like, and because I told him too, I was like, I was like, okay, he's probably thinking like I'm first HOH, I've got this target on my back. So I wanted to be like, hey, like that doesn't intimidate me. Like I want to play the game with people who also want to play the game. Because you've shown like, you're willing to put your neck out there and be a strong player. And those are the types of people that I want to work with. So I was hoping that something in there would resonate with him. But I had a bad feeling after, we were talking for about 10 minutes. And he's like, I'm going to go get a snack and left. And I'm like, okay, this is not good. Like, I'm literally the first person to have a one-on-one with you. And you are like, you're telling me that like I'm saying the right things or like you really like what I'm saying. But then you're leaving the room and like not coming back. And there were just little things over the first couple days where it was like, I would try to engage him in a conversation and he would, back and forth for a little bit and then he'd leave and then he would go do something else. And it was just so frustrating because I would see him in these group settings and talking to all these people and he's hanging around and like Daniel loved to talk about Elvis, talk about himself. And it's like, I'm trying to get you to do that with me. And you are just like trying to like find any out to leave the conversation. So from that moment, like I knew I was in trouble. So when he told me like I was just a pawn, I was like, I don't buy that for a second, especially when he said it was like the people that he's talked the least amount of game with. I was like, I know that there are people, because like I was watching and observing. It was like there are people who are up in your room for like a couple minutes. And like I know we had more conversations than you had with with this person or that person. And, come to find out later, like, I think Taylor said she never had a one-on-one with him until he pulled her up and was like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to put 2 people up and tell them it's because I haven't talked game with them. So I wanted to make it look like you and I had a game talk. So like, I knew, like, I was pretty spot on there. It's like, I knew something was off. And it's funny to me too. It's just like on paper, Daniel and I should have had a lot in common, a lot to connect on. Like, he was a super fan. We were both theater kids. Like we had stuff that we could have easily, even if it's just like a superficial connection that you're kind of looking for the first week to feel like I'm okay with someone. It should have been there. It's like, I don't know what it was about me that he didn't jive with, but ultimately like in the moment it was stressful, but looking back, I'm not mad how it worked out.
Did you consider talking about how tall you were?
That is something else we had in common, but no, unfortunately, I didn't think that was my best point.
That was his big thing. He said he didn't want to take out other tall people. That got the tall people had to stick together.
But, I did hear something he talked about, like wanting the strong guys to stick together. And like, okay, like here we go. I was afraid of this, but whatever.
Yeah.
Didn't work out for him. So
it did seem like he was very hung up on the superfan angle. I think it was him that noticed that that I think you had opened the door and held it for everyone.
I was not about to be the first one in.
And I mean, that's broken now. Like it's out in the open now on the show. Everyone now knows that's an indication that you're, I guess, either a super fan or just a polite person.
Yeah. And it's funny to me though, too, that because he was like, oh, like if that was the reason, because I was a super fan, it's like, I really wanted to work with other super fans because I was like, I want to be able to talk game with people. And like, if I talk about a backdoor strategy, I don't want to have to teach you what a backdoor is. I don't want to, like, I want to be able to have I always said, like, in my preseason stuff and in casting, a relationship like Chada and Tiffany had last year, where they were both super smart, super strategic, but they weren't like threatened or intimidated by each other. And they could have these conversations and just completely let the walls down and like show each other like, yes, I'm smart. I'm thinking things through. Cause like, I really wanted someone I could bounce ideas off of, which luckily I found in Brittany. But so for me to hear another super fan be like, oh, like I'm threatened about other super fans. I'm like, why? Like, I feel like that's an easy angle and like someone you'd want on your side rather than trying to get out. But especially that you hear him complain about people postseason, like, oh, so-and-so didn't know the game so well, or didn't know how the veto worked. It's like, well, those are the people you tried to work with. So
yeah. You did try to work with Turner early on. And he basically just turned you and Brittany down in the first couple of days. What was that like?
So looking at Turner, I was like, okay, I feel like Turner's probably going to be judged in a similar way that I am, where, you know, he's not this, you know, buff muscle guy. You know, even just like he kind of have like a eclectic style and the tattoos. And like, these are the types of people historically in Big Brother who are targeted early because people see them kind of as like an outlier, someone easy to get rid of. And I was like, going into the game, I was like, well, those are the people like I want to try to cultivate a relationship with and work with. But it was pretty clear Turner did not see himself that way. And, you know, to his credit, he did get in with, you know, the muscular guys pretty well.
A little bit.
So, you know, can't hate on that. But yeah, it was pretty obvious that he didn't want to work with me at all. And it became very apparent like throughout the game, like when he would come and I could tell when it's like, okay, like you're just talking to me now because you feel like you have to, because I've opened the door so many times and it's been not reciprocated. And then when you need something, oh, hey, you know, it means so much to me that you try to work with me. I trust you so much. Like, okay, sure you do.
Yes. And then the sort of the big moment for your game, obviously you're going to win the veto in the first week to keep yourself safe. But even before then, you were probably okay. Obviously anything can happen in the first week, but you were probably okay because you end up being approached by what at the time was known as the Mamba Alliance. And this is not something I think that would normally happen to a person who is at the very least, like, it's already been talked about that you might go on the block. And so normally you'd kind of be like, well, let's stay away from people that are going to go up on the block. Yeah. In addition to that, like, you know, this was kind of like, it was a lot of like let's get the strong guys and the you know, beautiful women all together, all the cool kids. And so they were initially looking at Pooch as the person, but you end up getting an invite instead. And this was, I think, just not, I think, what we're used to in terms of who might get an invite here. You had a very funny response to the invite as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Paloma approached me in the storage room. I think it was the morning of day 3. So I hadn't been nominated yet. And basically, to sum up the conversation, she says, you know, I'm putting together this alliance. It's me, Amira, Alyssa, Monty, Kyle. They're all in. And now, like, you're our 6th. And this is the name. And we're going to run this to the final 6. And I'm like, okay. So I've had no say in anyone who's a part of the alliance. I didn't have a say in naming the alliance. I am the last person to be found to find any of this out. Like, absolutely not. Like, I'll tell you what you want to hear right now, but I am not trusting this at all because for all those reasons, like, obviously, like if I was a priority, I would have been approached earlier or been included on like at least the name, like never name an alliance and then bring someone else into it. So in my mind, I'm like, and at that time, keep in mind as well, Paloma and Alyssa were backstage. So I'm like, okay, like this can't be real. This is probably just to like cover our ass type of thing, just in case there's some sort of house vote. So I'm thinking this is basically a fake alliance at the beginning. But I later go on the block. So I'm like, well, I have no choice. But I do think it's interesting, or I guess I was glad that I was included. And I think the one thing going into the game, and sorry to kind of deviate a little bit, I said I would never volunteer to be a have-not. I was like, that's so stupid. Why would you do that? And then night 1, I'm the first person to raise my hand because I was like, okay, maybe this is some way that I can buy goodwill with the HOH and the house. didn't work, but it's okay. But I think the best thing that I got out of that is I had that room with Monty,
Yeah.
Joseph, and Kyle, who are the muscular guys who I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not, going to be the first person people associate with them. It gave me a lot of time to like build that relationship, which ultimately is how I think I was approached for that alliance. I think it was Monty and Kyle who were like, we'd rather have Michael than Pooch. So that felt good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it was that that have not room that really helped you. I think that obviously Paloma also was like, yeah, let's do Michael. But definitely Monty and Kyle were, I think, the main driving force in sort of being like, yeah, Pooch is kind of a wild card. What about this Michael guy? And I think that's interesting because we try to think a lot about early game strategy for somebody that might be going on the block early or might be in trouble. And I think it's an interesting concept to think of, like, a couple of things, right? Like from the Turner perspective, or from the Daniel perspective, anybody that has any kind of common interest with you is another super fan. Like, you should take that opportunity. And at the same time, it seems like just throw your bag in, even if you're not in the have not room, throw your bag into a room full of people that you don't think you're going to relate to as much, because if you can just like force yourself into it and bond with them, even just a little bit initially, early on, to like avoid that initial sort of barrier between you so that you have some sort of foundation. The people that you will bond with and get along with, they're the easy people. It's the people that like would normally dismiss you or not, you don't have as much in common, that are going to be more difficult. And so, yeah, like getting stuck up there with all the big dudes when you were coming in, like, yeah, I don't know if I get along with like alpha dudes as much, is like, it really did. I think it was huge for you in the game. And then, of course, on top of that, you win that first veto, and now it's like, okay, there's some real value here. You know how to win competitions. Things might be looking up here.
Yeah, and I was hoping that winning that veto would kind of change the perception, because I definitely think people were not expecting me to be a strong player. And they were looking at someone like Monty and Kyle and Joseph, like, oh, these are the guys who are going to win the comps. So they were trying to work with them. So I was like, hey, maybe this will do something. It didn't. Like, I had nobody coming up to me after that first veto and being like, oh, like, you're a strong player, I want you on my side. So I don't know. I think when you're 6'4" and have like pencils for arms, like, there's nothing you're gonna do except win like 7 competitions before people are like, oh, okay, maybe he actually is like a strong competitor. But so yeah, whatever, it is what it is. And I was like, I'm just happy to be here for another week, and I'll figure it out moving forward. But I was hoping that would kind of help shift the perception. But I think being put up the first week, you're just put behind, because no one wants to strategize with the person they think isn't going to be there the next week. So I think people were like, okay, well, he might go home, let me focus elsewhere, which I don't blame them. Like, that's not a stupid thing to do. Like, when you're trying to keep yourself safe for the next week, you're going to focus and put your energy where you think, is going to be the most beneficial, because it's so hard to get one-on-one time with people. There are so many people that you have to talk to. There's 15 other people in the house. You're going to prioritize who you think is going to get you farthest in the game. So I get that, but also it was like, okay, I was hoping this would shift things for me a little bit, but it was like, I guess I'm relying on this alliance that I don't think is real, but it's all I have right now. I had that, and I had a relationship with Brittany, who was backstage. So I was like, this isn't looking good for me.
Yeah, and early on, you build the relationship with Brittany. It seemed like at first it was kind of like, it'd be great to be able to work with Brittany, but I'm not sure that that's a possibility. Especially, I don't remember how much. Yeah, I think you knew that that she had tried to rat out Pooch, rat out Amira to Pooch early on and got caught. And it was like, well, yeah. We'll see how much we can tell Brittany, probably, I imagine, was the thought process.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think I understood where Brittany was coming from, because it was like because we really didn't know, and all we would do is sit around and speculate, what is the backstage twist, what's going to happen, And it was very clear that if Pooch had any decision or influence on who was in jeopardy, he was going to save Paloma and Alyssa. And it just seemed kind of the general vibe from the house was that was probably what was going to happen. So like, I get it. Brittany's back is against the wall. She is going to try everything. Like, she's a super fan. She is going to try everything that she can to stay in the house, because she would regret it if she went home first because of this twist. And she had this information that could have saved her, and she sat on it. So like, I think a lot of people were kind of skeptical of Brittany, and she shot herself in the foot with a lot of people, but I was like, I get it. And I think that was part of the reason why I also wanted to work with super fans, because like, they're going to get it, and they're not going to take things so personally when, if Brittany does something like that, like I understood, because I can put myself in her shoes and be like, if that were me, I would have done the exact same thing. But other people are just like, oh, like she did something against me, like death to Brittany now. And I was just like, okay, like that's not how you play the game. But
you also did bond with Taylor pretty early on. And I believe you talked about Taylor as somebody that you would want to bring far in the game. Of course, a lot of stuff is going to blow up around Taylor in that first week. What was your experience of that?
Yeah, so I remember, I think I was in the HOH room with maybe Nicole and Brittany, and all of a sudden, like, Amira bursts in and she's like, Taylor's got to go. Paloma is crying downstairs. Taylor did something, like, she's got to go, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I remember I had the veto at that point. So I was like, well, like, okay, I have no idea what's going on, but it was just this weird thing where it was like, everyone all of a sudden has to know exactly right now that Taylor needs to be the one to go home. And then I think Turner came in, and Turner said, like, I didn't really get it. Turner said, like, Taylor made a comment, like, about him using a bowl or something, like leaving a dirty bowl somewhere.
Yeah, she wanted him to do the dishes.
Yeah, which fair. I don't know if I ever saw him do the dishes in the 65 days I was in the house. But it's just like those little things week one that anyone is going to look for any reason. And it was just like, who cares if or apparently Paloma said, like, she made a comment when Paloma dropped a piece of pineapple, like, oh no, not the pineapple. It's like, who cares? Like, I don't know. So to me, like, and I didn't know any of this at the time. I think all that I was told was that Taylor made Paloma cry. And then there were other rumors floating around about stuff, and people are like saying that Taylor was bullying them. And I was like, I've only had positive experiences with Taylor, and like, she's been super nice to me. Like, I don't know what, but at that point, it was just like, I think I was the last person to know about any of that. So I was like, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that I can do here. But I did not want her to go home that first week. And she had come up to me. I remember when she did get put up, and she was like, here's my plan for how I'm going to attack this. Like, if I have your vote. Oh, because I think it was after Paloma had left, and she was like, I'm going to tell people, if you vote me out, we're down 2 women. I'm going to go try to rally the women together. I'm like, yes, like, sounds good. Like, you can do that. I'm fully on board. But I don't know. It was just a strange thing. And week one, everyone's looking for anything, any reason to paint a target and then run with that, because like, hey, if it's not me, I make it through the first week. So I understand why everyone was quick to jump on the, let's get Taylor out. But it was like, if you actually talk to her, because that was another thing too. Paloma was like, you guys, everyone keeps leaving the room when Taylor comes in, blah, blah. So like, she's like, you guys have to stop that. Well, nobody stopped that except, so Taylor and I ended up alone. And I also kind of felt like that, like where I would come into a room and eventually people would trickle out. And so like, there were quite a few times when it was just me and Taylor were the only ones left. And so we got to talk quite a bit that first week. And I was like, oh, like, I really like her. Like, I don't want this to go through. So I was really happy with how week one played out.
It did seem like as somebody who knew the game, that you, and this is just like a sense that I got, that you sort of understood that this is a thing that happens and that it's usually not fair. It's usually like this ostracization that happens, and that there was, of course, a moment where you were like, where you made a joke, and then you immediately felt bad about it. You're like, oh, I was trying to fit in.
Yep.
And then like, oh, but that, like, I feel like I shouldn't have done that. Is that the case? Were you kind of like, I've seen this before, and it's usually not a good thing.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way. And it's hard because like, as things are going on, and like, if you like, as a live feed, I'm like, okay, I can click through the cams, I can watch the episodes, and I can see what people are seeing. But like, when you're in there and like, I'm up in the HOH room, I have no idea what's being said down in the bedrooms. I have no idea what's being said down in the backyard. So a lot of it was like, well, everyone is saying the same thing. I don't know like what there's even to be done here. And so, and I remember kind of when some of the girls were in the back bedroom and I think they were trying to come up with like a spicy goodbye message for her or something. And I think I gave someone a suggestion and I was like, oh, like I feel I didn't want to do that. But I was also thinking, because I had thought about this, like going into the house, it's like, how do you, like, I kind of related to like starting a new job. Like, how do you know a coworker likes you and trusts you? They're willing to talk shit about other coworkers to you. So I always said like, okay, if I go in the house and I'm in a position where I have to kind of, you know, play along, like that's a sign of trust. Maybe it's something I have to consider. And it didn't last very long. So I was like, okay, no, I don't like this. But
yeah.
I remember thinking that week one, I was like, gosh, I'm on the bottom. What can I do to show these people that like, hey, I'm with the house. But it was not super enjoyable. That part of the first week was really tough.
So we get into the second week after Taylor is not voted out. Nobody's voted out. And you say to the cameras on the feeds that you threw this competition to Jasmine. On the episodes, they really made it out to seem like you probably, I guess, didn't throw it. But on the feeds, you said you threw it. Did you throw it?
I did. Yeah. The final round. I tried all the way up till the final round, and Jasmine. I did watch the pie competition, so I know they included a little bit of our conversation. But she directly told me, she was like, you know, if I win this, like, I'm not going to put you or Brittany up. I think people at that point were kind of seeing that Brittany and I were close. So she told me that. And so I was like, you know, I'm still going to try to get the right answer. I'm not going to go as fast as I was trying to get them in these other rounds. But I was like, if Jasmine wins, because I just won the veto, I was like, I don't necessarily want to win the next HOH as well. So if she can win and I don't have to worry about going up, that's awesome. I'll still, you know, try. I'm not just going to buzz in with the wrong answer and let her win by default, but you know, I'll wait till she buzzes in before I buzz in.
Did you feel like you had an idea of who Jasmine would target and put up?
There were talks. I think maybe I heard from Amira earlier that day that Pooch was saying that he would go up as a pawn the following week. So she might have even told me that she was going to take Pooch out, which I was totally fine with. That's who I wanted out that next week. So I was like, perfect. Like, you're going to go after the person I want to go after, and I don't have to, you know, grow the target on my back. Like, that's fine by me.
All right. So that's pretty much what happens. Pooch volunteers, and Taylor is sort of like initially a little bit of a target, but then, you know, mostly becomes the decoy target. And there's another veto competition. And you want to also throw this one, but you also want Pooch out. You don't want Taylor out. And eventually that means that you're going to have to win this one. How were you, like, upset that you had to win this, or were you just like, whatever, maybe this will be the one that gets me some more respect? Yeah,
probably more of the latter there. I was definitely like, I didn't want to have to win it, but I was like, you know what, I can use this. So Jasmine was HOH, and it was very clear from Jasmine's HOH that the women were working very closely together. And I was like, okay, I can maybe use this as a sign of good faith to get in stronger with this group, to be like, you know, I'll win the veto and we can decide what we want to do with it. So, and it's so hard when competitions are happening, you're so focused on what you're doing. And I remember like kind of trying to look around a little bit, and I saw that Pooch had one of the balls in and he had a bunch on his ramp or whatever. So I was like, you know what, there's a chance that he could like knock like two of these in one shot. Maybe, you know, I just have to go for it. It was coming down to me and Taylor, and she asked me to let her take a shot first, which I did, because I was like, okay, perfect. If she can win and pull herself down, like I would love that. Then I don't have to show any of my cards to the rest of the house. So I was like, I don't know if I can use this veto if everyone is saying don't use it. I knew she was going to be safe no matter what at the time of the veto. But I was like, I would like to pull her down, but I also can't really risk, especially that I was just put up last week. It's so easy for the people who go up early to be put up again as pawns. Like, well, they've already been up. They already have someone they're mad at. So I was like, gosh, I just need to like keep my head down, but do what I can to get in with the group. So like, if she can win it, perfect. Please go for it. So she, fortunately, she just came up short. So like, I have to try now. But I was like, worst case scenario would have been Pooch winning the veto. So I was like, at least I can stop that from happening.
Yeah, there's kind of three other major things from my perspective in this week. One, of course, and this is something that kind of happened at the end of the last week, but Nicole is going to replace Paloma in what becomes Pose Pack.
Yeah. I have stuff to say on that.
Okay, well, please talk to me about Pose Pack and the addition of Nicole.
Yeah. So I had an okay relationship with Nicole, I thought, where I was like, I'm not super concerned that she'll come after me. It was very obvious that Nicole and Daniel became very close that first week, which I was like, okay, so that's why I'm a little iffy on Nicole, because I don't think Daniel likes me. But I remember it was the day of the first live show, so day 9, and I wake up in the Have Not room, and Kyle was in there, and Kyle was like, hey, like, you know, some people in Pose Pack were talking. Now that Paloma's gone, we think, you know, we're considering bringing in another woman to, you know, round out our 6 again. And he was like, they're talking between Nicole and Jasmine. And I was like, no, we shouldn't bring anyone else in. Like, that's stupid. Like, because I know how like I felt shitty, like being kind of in like very early, but knowing that I was last. And now you're going to tell someone, hey, this has been an alliance for a week. Since Paloma's gone, now you made the cut. Now you're joining the team. Like, that's not going to go over well.
And literally naming it after Paloma.
Yeah.
The person they're replacing. We talked about this, like giving somebody like the jersey of somebody who like,
yeah,
like, here, you're the replacement.
Exactly. It was so stupid. And then, and I remember telling her, I was like, well, I'd rather, you know, have Jasmine than Nicole, not because of anything against Nicole, but I was like, Alyssa and Jasmine were pretty clearly already getting close. And so I was like, okay, so I think there's some trust there that she's not going to try to screw over Alyssa, and blowing up that alliance would do that. So maybe, you know, and I just felt like, and we knew Nicole was close to Daniel. So I was like, there's a chance that she leaks it. So I'm like, if we have to have someone, it should be Jasmine. Well, by the time I get downstairs, Monty's like, oh, it's done. We got Nicole. I'm like, okay, like another decision I was not consulted on. So then again, I'm like even more mad with this alliance, but I'm like, still pretty much all I have. So I guess Nicole's a part of it. And I guess come to find out, she pretty much ratted us out immediately to Daniel, which is like, this is exactly what I said would happen if you had all taken the time to consult me. But, you know, it is what it is.
There was a little bit of discrepancy here because when the feeds came back, there was a lot of talk amongst Pose Pack that it was Monty's call, that Monty like just went ahead and brought in Nicole. In the episodes, they made it out to be that it was kind of like a Mira's decision to bring Nicole in. Can you like weigh in on that in any way? Like, who would you credit the most?
I was asleep when those conversations were had, I think. I have no idea. Monty was the one who told me that Nicole was in. But I guess, and I think maybe it had been explained a little bit after that. And I guess I don't remember. Maybe it could have been Amira, because I think the thought process was, well, since Alyssa's so close with Jasmine, she's kind of like, you know, Alyssa's +1 outside of the alliance. So it would make more sense to bring in Nicole because, you know, that extends our influence over the house farther. And I'm just like in theory, yes. But that's assuming Nicole isn't going to already have alliances and be more loyal to other people. And Nicole, I also knew, was a big fan of the show. So like, she's going to be smart enough to know that this did not just form now. And I should have picked up on it even more. Like, I didn't ever think Nicole was fully in, but I was taking a shower one day and she came up to me and she was like, so how do you really feel about Pose Pack? And I'm like, okay, like, that's not exactly what you want to hear. And maybe I should have taken that opportunity to be a little more transparent with her, but I tried to play it off like, I'm all for the team, blah, blah, blah. Like, I didn't want her to run back. But I think she was kind of feeling me out to see like if I felt the same way she did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not only did she immediately rat out Pose Pack to Daniel pretty much, but they had multiple conversations about like, how can we split this up as soon as possible? Like, how can we, and the target at that time was Monty. It was like, how can we take out Monty and break this alliance up? Which was sort of the impetus of Old School in the first place. So So another thing that happens this week is that you and Brittany start talking about like pulling Taylor in a more like long-term sense. You have those conversations with Taylor. These are sort of the seeds of what eventually will become like a more solid final three once the leftovers get together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really happy, number one, that I found Brittany, because she was someone that I just knew that I could trust her. Something about her, and I think we were drawn to each other because like we weren't the loudest people in the room. We weren't the ones who were always fighting for attention or, everyone look at me, I'm going to tell a funny story or anything like that. And so like we were just kind of like quieter, more observing. So I think that really drew us together. And then I was really happy that she felt the same way with Taylor that I felt. And it was like, okay, like that's good. Like we're on the same page. We're kind of viewing the game in the same way. I will say one thing that's kind of funny, and like, not that I ever really wanted, to be in an alliance with Daniel as of week 2. But I remember talking with Brittany. I was like, gosh, like Nicole and Daniel are in such a similar position as we are, in that, they're kind of in, like, Daniel's kind of in with the guys, but not really. Nicole's kind of in with the women, but not really. And that was exactly how Brittany and I were feeling. It was like, it would make so much sense on paper for us to work together because we are in the same position, kind of in the middle. But like we just knew that they were not going to see it that way. I think that Daniel thought he had a much stronger grasp on the game than he actually did. And no one likes being told, you're at the bottom of whatever alliance you think you have. And I think that was another thing, again, about me and Brittany, is like, we were very able to see, like, Brittany was like, yep, backstage, I'm probably toast. And like, neither of us really deluded ourselves to thinking like, oh, we're in such a great spot, we're doing so well, because it's like, it's way more beneficial to be self-aware and recognize your weaknesses than try to convince yourself that you have this incredible game going on. And it was like, okay, that's not going to be possible with Daniel. So we never even tried. But I remember thinking that is like, honestly, that would probably be our smartest for all of our collective interests. But it was like, it's not going to happen. So I'm not even going to try and give him any ammunition to use against us.
Mm-hmm. Well, the rest of the week goes pretty smoothly. There is some brewing tension between I would say the Monty and Kyle side of Pose Pack and the Amira, Nicole, and Alyssa side. They're of course going to go off and create Old School, which doesn't really last very long. And then of course Alyssa's got something brewing with Kyle, eventually tells him or very quickly tells him about Old School because it's not that big of a deal. And this is, Kyle has long conversations with Monty about it. They also come to you with it. And I have to imagine, because at the time I was thinking this, that you were like, great. It's I'm not in a good place in this alliance anyway. Like if they want to fight each other, great.
Yep, that is exactly what I thought. I was very happy to hear that. Pose Pack was still all I really had at that point. So I was like, okay, I don't know what we necessarily do with this information. But I was like, if I hear that people are not getting along, and it sounded like Monty and Kyle wanted to keep Pooch that week.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there was some sort of argument in the storage room, but where maybe Nicole and Amira and Monty was not happy about it. So I was like, okay, perfect. Like if you guys want to fight, like be my guest. And I think, and kind of like on this thing, like I never expected. So from week 1, it was when Mambo was a thing. It was very clear that it was like Alyssa and Paloma were kind of a pair. Monty and Kyle were kind of a pair. So like I remember talking to Amira and be like, hey, like it's kind of would make sense for you and I to like keep each other in the loop, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of how I saw the alliance. So once Paloma left and then Nicole came in, that really threw off that whole dynamic. And I was like, okay, now I think Alyssa and Amira are getting closer. So I don't really feel like I have a person in the alliance anymore. But I was just have-nots with Monty and Kyle. And then when week 2, we all moved down into the car room together. So it was like, okay, I'm still in this room with them. So they were the 2 that I was talking the most with in the alliance, just kind of because of sleeping arrangements. So that's one thing I would say. Sleeping arrangements matter a lot, especially early on, because that's sometimes the only time you can get. And it actually worked out really well for me because the only other space for me to put my clothes was in the bubble room in the back. So I always had a room to go in the car, or a reason to go in the car room because that was my room. Always had a reason to go into the bubble room because that's where my stuff was. Everyone walked through the middle bedroom. So that was something else I just kind of like low key that I was like, oh, this worked out well for me. I always have a reason to go into whatever room I need to. So, but being roommates with someone, like you talk with them more. So I think that really helped that I was with Monty and Kyle at that time.
Yeah. Well, the week ends and there's a new twist, the bestie twist. I was not a fan of this twist because of how amazingly it set up Pose Pack if Pose Pack had decided to stick together. And you, of course, are going to choose Brittany as your festy bestie, under the assumption that, you know, Pose Pack still exists and this is sort of like a backup plan. That if you aren't able to win the veto and keep you both safe, then at least she will be voted out in front of you. Were you thinking about the tension that existed already? Because it felt like without the bestie twist, things were about to explode in Pose Pack. Bestie twist kind of like puts a cover over it for a second, and then it explodes anyway.
Yeah. I remember like when Julie hit us with the twist and we're out there, you know, hearing the rules for the lighter comp, and I'm like hardly paying attention because I'm just trying to think. It's like, gosh, there's so much going on here. And at that point, I think the news about old school was still fairly new. So I'm thinking like, gosh, I don't know what to do. And then like before the comp started, Nicole whispered, she was like, you have to pick outside the alliance. I'm like, okay. So I was like, no matter what, I have to pick someone outside of Pose Pack because that's going to look sketchy if I don't. And then I was like, well, but I don't want to pick someone who's also an old school, because if that is a thing, or the people in Pose Pack decide that's a better option, well, then I'm toast. So I think that only left me with Joseph, Brittany, Taylor, and Indy. I think were maybe like the only four people. Like, I have to choose one of the four of them, because then if, you know, I should be able to stay if I'm up against any of them. But I was also like, oh gosh, there was so much going through my head at that time. I was like, I want to pick someone who I think I can work with, because we knew our competitions were going to be played with our partners. So I was like, I need to pick someone who I can communicate with, because that's going to be the most important thing for these comps if you're playing in pairs. But so someone that I can also kind of trust enough to talk strategy with, in case either of us get into power, or coming up with a plan for how we're going to stay off the block. And so that's kind of how I was like, okay, so if I pick Brittany, and I'm standing there stepping back and forth with the lighter, I'm like, so if I pick Brittany, I already knew that Amira was kind of coming for Brittany. So I was like, I was afraid Amira was going to drop to sit with Brittany and to send her home. So that's why I dropped so early. But then I was like, okay, this is, and I knew that I wanted to take Brittany as far as I could in the game. Ultimately, I was like, you know, I knew Pose Pack was going to fall apart at some point. So I was like, if I can keep Brittany until that happens, then we can like truly work together. So this maybe is the only option that I have. If, you know, comes to if I can win an HOH or we can win a veto together, that keeps us both safe. This is what I can do to protect her. But worst case scenario, if we do end up on the block together, I should have the votes to stay. But yeah, I definitely knew that, or at Pose Pack, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. It's Pose Pack and this old school thing. Just try to set yourself up so that if one side wins out over the other, you still have a chance to stay.
How did you feel in this competition? Did you feel like you could have done well, or did you feel like, eh?
I don't know. I definitely could have done better than I did because I threw it. But I think it was kind of a crapshoot. Like, so I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I definitely would have won. Turner was really good at that one. I don't know if I could have beat him in it. Who knows? But my head was just like in a million other places because I was like, and in my head too, I was like, okay, obviously I would love to be HOH and be safe, but I think, you know, we figured the twist, or at least I did at that point. It was like probably at least until jury. So probably at least 3 weeks. Is it more important for me to, you know, have no choice in who my partner is to get HOH? Or if I stay in this comp long enough where I'm second or third, I'm only going to have a couple of options, and they might be people who I do not want to be paired with because of the old school Pose Pack thing. So I thought it was more beneficial to get my choice of partner to set myself up for the next couple of weeks, rather than in the short term be stuck with a partner maybe that I didn't want.
Well, you do end up nominated by Turner. The initial plan is to backdoor Taylor, and that's not great.
No.
But you are going to be a part of the push to turn things around here. Of course, Kyle and Monty. You know, Kyle in particular is really still feeling like, I don't know about this whole thing. Joseph is going to start, you know, sort of sharing some feelings about Amira and what's happening with her. The Pound gets together the night before the leftovers do. And they come up with a new plan, which is that instead of backdooring Taylor, they're going to backdoor Amira. You are informed of the plan and kind of told, like, hey, get Brittany on board with this. What's your thought process when you first hear about this?
So I think Kyle filled me in a little bit right before the veto competition. And I remember he was kind of explaining that, you know, these four guys were talking in the HOH room and kind of have an idea. And I think even before he was done, I was like, yes, I am in. Like, I don't feel good about where we're at all. And to hear that there's like a new group forming, especially because the alliances that I've been in up to this point have been, hey, you're in this, you're the last one in, here's the name. And this one felt like it was still forming. So like, okay, I like that a lot better. And I was like, I am completely down because the game needed to be shaken up at that point. I think a lot of us recognized where things were headed and it didn't look good. And at that point too, the biggest thing for me was I think Amira and Nicole had come up to me maybe the day before and had said, you know, we think there's 3 weeks until jury. The next 3 people out are going to be Taylor, Brittany, and Indy, because they're going to be emotional jurors and we don't want them on the jury, this, that, and the other. And I was like, those are the 3 people outside of PostPac that I feel closest with, the 3 people that I would want on the jury, and I get no say and I have to lose all 3 of them. This really fueled into that old school thing because it was like, so 3 people, none of whom are in PostPac, none of whom are in old school. It's pretty clear you are keeping your options open. Like, why do I have to get rid of the 3 people that I like the best outside of this alliance? And you get to keep Jasmine and Terrence and Daniel and like everyone. And I have to get rid of all of my people. So like, I was so fed up at that point. I was like, I'm not being consulted on anything. This is just, I was like, this, you're just trying to cover your ass with me. Like, oh, we're in this alliance, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm expected to be like, oh my gosh, thank you for taking me to jury. Like, I appreciate it so much. And then when we get there, you have the option if you want to cut me or not. So I was just like, absolutely not. I was looking for any reason to get out at that point. I was like, you know what, if I have to ride this out for a little bit, I will. But if something comes along that's better, I'm going to hop on it. So the second Kyle said there was something brewing, I was like, yep, I'm in.
Yes, and it also includes Taylor. You're going to quickly make a final 3 with her and Brittany. You've also developed a sort of like, I don't know if maybe you called it a final 3, but it felt more like a loose grouping of you, Brittany, and Kyle. And you know, this is a much, as you said, a much better kind of setup for you in general. Still not like the best, as we'll get to. But it is sort of like, yeah, a stepping stone from where you were previously to sort of potential future. Of course, there's a lot of drama that surrounds all of this. What happens with Daniel, Nicole, and Taylor, and then the trying to get Taylor up into the HOH room is all happening. Did this feel very like momentous to you at the time?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Day 18, I think it was quite the day in the Big Brother house. There was the big blow up. There was the veto where Jasmine passed out, and then Brittany and I ended up winning it, and then the leftovers forming. It was a crazy day, and we would joke about it, and then we were like, "There's no way they can fit all this in one episode," and then it turns out they couldn't.
Yeah.
But it was quite the day. It felt like 5 days packed into one, but ultimately ended up being a very good day for me. So no complaint. Oh, and it was Joseph's birthday that day too. So it was like, there's just so much going on.
Yeah. Well, the plan goes through, everything works out. Mira is going to be blindsided, and Monty is going to win the next HOH. This was, I think, only the second competition that you didn't actively throw, I think.
Oh yeah, the
That you
stupid
lost.
envelope open.
Yeah.
Oh, I hated that one.
What happened? Why didn't you get an envelope?
You know, I just didn't have the right strategy. It was a very strategic competition, and I just, I don't know. I opened it. I thought I was moving really fast. Like I wasn't opening the whole envelope. I was just tearing the corner because you could see the people up on stage. I could see the entire card was red. So like, okay, I just need to tear a little bit. If it's red, I'm throwing, or not red, I'm throwing it. But I just didn't find one. So
There
is
you
what it
go.
is. But of course, we were like, as we formed the alliance, we're like, okay, we're going to do this. And then it's going to be, we'll have 6 people playing in the next HOH. And then, of course, 4 people don't make it to part 2. 3 of them are leftovers. So we're like, oh, well, this was short lived because I'm like in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to be the one to like blow up an alliance like the next week. But I was like, someone's probably going to blow it up if someone outside of us wins, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. So this next week, there's a lot of talk about, having to go back and forth with what the initial plan is. Should Taylor go up initially? Should she not have to be a pawn? And then, okay, it's going to be Alyssa and Indy. And the fake plan is to backdoor Taylor. And the real plan is to send out Nicole. But from your perspective, the better plan is to take out Alyssa, because then you can convince Indy to join your bestie group because of how the bestie twist works. As long as you have one person that's not in the leftovers in your bestie group, you'll definitely be safe. And even as it stood, the only way for anybody to even get rid of you was to backdoor you, because the veto would definitely have to be used by anybody that won it on you if you were initially on the block. So it would have to be a backdoor. So you were already pretty safe, but this is like just really optimizing the optimization. And you do eventually convince Monty to go this route, because you say, hey, for all you know, how this works is that the person voted out Nicole, the person left Taylor, will have to choose one of the 3 of you, Monty, Joseph, or Terrence, to join hers to make it all even again. And she will obviously choose Terrence, and then you'll be vulnerable again. Whereas, if it's Indy, she'll choose one of you, and then you'll still be fine. So you convince Monty, but then you got to convince Kyle, and Kyle has to convince Daniel, and this is a bit messy. Of course, Kyle and Daniel win this veto. So this is kind of a breaking point in the leftovers. The push to get Kyle to take out Alyssa. Did you think that he would be down for this? And did you think that this would have any kind of lasting ramifications?
At that point in week 4, I thought he would be more willing, especially if everyone was on board for it. But I knew he didn't necessarily want to. But at that point, because from my perspective, it's like, okay, Kyle has already like leaked all this information that Alyssa has given him. He's actively worked against her. He blindsided her on the last vote. So if it comes down to it, I was still thinking like, okay, you know what? There's a pretty good chance that he is really separating personal and game, and he'll go along with it. So let's, fingers crossed that's what happens. And, to us, he was telling us he would do it. I don't know for sure if I fully even believe that now. I, like I said, without watching the episode, I guess I don't know if that was in it. But according to him, and, later in the jury house, we had talked about it too. And he said he did try to talk to Daniel, but Daniel shut it down immediately. So who knows if that's the case or not, but
basically how it went was, it started with Monty. Monty said, hey, Daniel, Nicole, I want to talk to you. And Daniel, before he even won, was like, if I win that veto, no chance am I using it, because I know they're going to put you up. And so he was already inclined to not use it. But when Monty says, hey, Daniel, Nicole, I need to talk, they immediately get together like, what, is he going to try to convince us to not use it? Like, is he trying to convince us to like change the plan? Does that mean he's Is he worried about something? And so they talk to Kyle, and he's like, oh, I wonder what Monty will have to say. They go up and talk to Monty. Monty tells them, don't use the veto. I'm worried that Alyssa, Jasmine, and Indy will flip on you. And they're like, those people are not flipping on me. Mm-hmm. You're concerned that you don't have the votes to send me out if you put me up. You're concerned that Taylor's going to be voted out instead. We see right through you. And so you clowns. And so Daniel goes to Kyle. And basically, like, Kyle is like, you could not. Kyle basically puts it in Daniel's hands. And the second Daniel says, like, I think he's trying to trick me, Kyle's like, oh, interesting. How do you think he's trying to trick you? And he starts counting votes. He's like, well, if Nicole goes up and we have these votes and he doesn't have these votes, then with you, we would have the votes to keep Nicole. And Kyle's like, wow, you're right. Yeah, you're definitely right about this. Like, he definitely does not push very hard. Yeah. And then the second he sees that Daniel's like maybe not going to do it, he leaps on that for sure. And then he goes up to Monty and says, yeah, they don't believe you. And Monty says, I
mean, they're lost.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, I know. I remember having a conversation with Taylor and someone else in the bathroom before the video. We're like, oh, gosh, like, how poetic would that be if Daniel won and used it to backdoor his best friend? And he thinks he's like pulling off this big move to get Taylor out. Like, how good, like, you can't write TV that good. And then we tried to stop it from happening and he still did it. And it was just like ridiculous, but I don't know. And I remember talking to Nicole too, because at that point as well, like, I still felt I had a pretty decent relationship with Nicole. I knew she was targeting other people besides me. So I was like, if Nicole stays, that's not bad for my game. And especially if Nicole's on the jury, I feel pretty good about her being a juror, who I would potentially have that vote. So that was also kind of like, selfishly for me, I was like, Nicole staying probably better for my game. So I was like, how am I going to spin this to make it sound like it's good for everyone else's game? And I convinced them, but apparently her best friend was not convinced. So that's what happened. But I remember having conversation with her being like, well, if you're worried, like, Daniel has the veto, he wouldn't use it. But I was like, I'm not about to push too hard. But
yeah, and this is one of, I think, your more successful sort of like persuasion moments, getting Monty to change his mind, sort of getting the whole alliance on board with taking out Alyssa. And even though it doesn't land, like I said, it does kind of form cracks that you are eventually going to, at the very least, try to take advantage of. And that kind of comes around toward the end of the week after Kyle, after the veto is used and it is Nicole that's leaving. Kyle approaches you and says, like, hey, we're not really going down to 7, are we? Like, when I hear that, I feel sick. I do not think that is the way that we should be going, right? I mean, you talked to Brittany about this afterward. Basically, what you said was like, sounds great. Happy that he said it. What were your thoughts at this point?
Yeah, so with the leftovers, it was tough because we were an alliance of 7, which is a big alliance, which, big alliances typically don't make it to their goal. So when everyone's like final 7, I'm like, I don't know if that's actually what's going to happen. But, I'm not about to, especially that early, I was not about to start saying anything. But we are also an alliance of arguably the 7 strongest competitors in the house. So it's like, okay, do I really want to be in a final 7 and then competing against the strongest players in the house? So I was like, you know what? I definitely thought it was too early. But I was like, you know what? It's good to know that people are, that Kyle is having these thoughts and he's including me in them, because if he wasn't, like, I'd rather know that someone's having these thoughts if they're telling me about it, because then when it comes down to it, you know what, that means they trust me more than other people in the alliance, and that's good for me. So I wasn't necessarily wanting to do that at that point, but it was like, hey, if someone else wants to take the shot and break things up and I can maybe sit in the middle, I'm not mad about it.
Yeah. Kyle's also going to make his final 2 with Turner pretty much that same night. I think he has that conversation with Turner. Daniel's going to be upset about the Nicole thing. He's going to go around saying, Monty and Michael, they're going to win the game. He's telling somebody in the pantry, and you walk in. And he goes, "Oh, there he is, winner of Big Brother 24, Michael." And then when he leaves, you say,
"I just wanted to find marinara sauce."
How was the marinara sauce?
It was from a can, so it was average, but
yeah. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like walking in, I was just like so taken aback. And especially like at that point, it was the final 13. Like you cannot say that one specific person is going to win the game at that point. And like, I don't know, Daniel was just mad that things were going off the rails. And then I think he was even mad at Nicole that day because he was like, he knew Nicole was going to leave. And he was like, "Oh, I want to spend time with my best friend before you go." And Nicole's like, "No, I need to campaign. I need to fight." And that rubbed Daniel the wrong way that Nicole was still trying to stay, apparently. I don't know, but it was just like everything that could go wrong for Daniel that week was going wrong for Daniel. And I think he was not handling it very well. And I don't know, if I were in his position, I would not have lashed out or called people out. It's like, no, you try to salvage the situation. But
you wouldn't have said this?
Oh, God. Just end the season already.
Gosh, like how narcissistic too. Like, oh, it's such a bad season because it didn't go my way. Like, get over yourself.
All right. I think at some point you also I think this is a conversation that happened.
This was Taran Armstrong, whatever he talked to him.
You had a conversation about me.
I don't fully remember that, but I'm not surprised. Brittany and I would talk about stuff that like I was not about to talk about that with anyone else because they would realize like I knew people knew I was a fan, but I was going to try to play down just how much of a fan I was. But like with Brittany, I was like, okay, we can talk about this kind of stuff. And like I remember people were talking about like Big Brother Canada, and I was just like dying. I was like, I want to be in on this conversation, but apparently there was like one season on Paramount Plus for a while, and so
they had everyone watch BB Can 6, or they had a few people watch BB Can 6 at least.
Yeah, and so people were talking about it. I was like, oh, I want to talk about Big Brother. Oh my gosh, one day Taylor brought up Ica, and I was like, I am dying inside. I want to talk about Ica. I love her. But I was like, I can't. Or so I think, well, Taylor had said she saw like a YouTube clip of like shredding the letter. So I think I said I saw the same clip or something. So I was like, I have to talk a little bit, but like, I can't be too obvious. But there were a lot of stuff like in the Big Brother community and podcasts and people. It was like, oh, like I want to talk about all this stuff, but I feel like I can't. It's going to put a bigger target on me.
Well, you're going to win this next HOH. And it's your sort of immediate plan is, okay, Monty, Joseph, Terrence on the block. You consider the idea of like not only a backup of maybe taking Terrence out, but maybe even a backup of taking Monty out. And this is the first of your 3 HOHs, and every single one of them you consider taking Monty out, and in every single one of them you choose not to. This is the first one where you choose not to, and this is on this one at least I was on board. It did seem a little early. However, literally this is also the first of all 3 weeks that you were HOH where Monty is going to go around talking about how you are a target of his.
Yeah. Even before we get into that, I do want to say I didn't really want to win that HOH, but because like I knew at that point, like, okay, I already have 3 vetoes, and I kept getting put into situations where I had to win, where it was like, the first, week 1 and 3, I was on the block. And then even like the little bye-bye backstage thing week 2, I was put up against Pooch, who I was like, I know is probably going to put me up if he gets HOH, so I have to try to knock him out. That's exactly what happened in the week 5 HOH. Daniel went first and put up a really good time, and then I was second. So I was like, well, I have to go for it to knock Daniel out, because if Daniel wins, he was putting together that we were working together. And so I was like, if he does put everything together and he realizes the vulnerable spot in that alliance is me and Brittany, I'm going to go up, and there's a good chance that I'm going to get voted out. So I was like, I have to knock Daniel out. And then, of course, my time no one else beats. So you know, not that I'm complaining that I was HOH, but I was like, I did not want to have to win that HOH and, you know, win my 4th competition in week 5. I was like, oh, that's, especially after Daniel just called me out. So, but I was like, I have to knock him out. So I kept getting put in these positions where I had to win and rack up my win count that I didn't necessarily want to, but, you know, I digress. I did what I had to do, but yeah. So, there was a lot to consider this week because at this point we thought there was a chance that the Festy Bestie twist would end the next week, but no one told us that. We didn't know that. So, and this is one thing. So like, obviously I wanted Daniel out. Like I was like, he's not going to work with me. He's probably the biggest physical competitor on the other side of the house. So it makes sense to get rid of him. However, if I get, so this is where kind of like, and I don't remember how much I talked about this, and I don't know if it even made the episode, probably not, because there were so many times like, I have 17,000 things to say about this strategy. I'm like, they're going to cut to like the juiciest things probably, because crunching numbers is not, you know, the exciting TV people tune in for. But I was thinking at that point, I think there were 5 Festy Bestie groups left. And so I was like, okay, if I get rid of Daniel, Kyle will join someone else, and that'll leave us at 4. If Festy Besties are still a thing next week, we're kind of in, you know, like a final 5 type situation where if the people who aren't nominated win the veto and use it, that forces the other people who aren't nominated up on the block. So if someone from the other side of the house wins next week, Brittany and I could be forced to go up on the block based on how the veto shakes out. So I was like, it would make sense to take out Terrence because I figured if Terrence went home, Monty and Joseph would just remain as a Festy Bestie pair. They wouldn't join someone else. So like then we're still at 5 and we avoid that situation where we could be forced up onto the block. So it was like from a selfish standpoint, that would make sense. But it was like, okay, the alliance is probably gonna be really pissed because we're like, okay, Brittany and Michael are the vulnerable spot. Now we just created another one by getting rid of Terrence for Monty and Joseph to now be vulnerable. They don't have insulation. So it was something that I was considering, but I was like, I think it's probably going to, the twist is probably going to end. It's going to piss off the rest of the alliance if we do this. So that's why I was like, I wouldn't have been horribly upset if Daniel and Kyle had won the veto that week. And then I was forced to do something like that. And it was like, okay, then it wasn't, I didn't choose to do that, but who knows? I'm not mad that Daniel went home, but I remember talking in the DR for hours and hours about my strategy. And it was like, I want Daniel out, number 1. Number 2 would be someone else outside of the leftovers. Preferably at that point, Terrence, because of the reason that I outlined and the pairing and everything. And then I was like, you know, and if shit hits the fan, Monty's a strong competitor. I guess that would be, you know, last, you know, if everything goes wrong, that wouldn't be a horrible HOH week, but it was never anything I was seriously going to do. But I'm like, hey, I'm going to consider all my options. But when I was in the DR, I was like, I know they are going to leave out all the stuff about the math and the numbers and just the, do I turn on my alliance? So like, they're probably going to latch onto that. But I'm guessing that's what was in the episode. I haven't watched it, but.
Well, I think from my perspective, at least, it was mostly just watching, first of all, you know, Kyle, who is starting to like really start to heavily pitch to you. And we'll talk about that soon. But Monty was saying to Kyle, Michael's the first to go. As soon as we get the shot, like first of the 7 at the very least. And I was expecting potentially for Kyle to just go straight to you and be like, hey, Monty is coming for you. And if you had heard that, already knowing that you had already thought about the possibility of taking the shot at Monty, that it might really like push you into overdrive. Never really happened in that way. But that's sort of like what because I was just like, Monty, what are you doing? Telling people he's literally HOH right now. Like, why are you saying this? But you do end up winning this veto. This is the first competition win and one of the only, I think, that I really just felt like was like, this didn't feel necessary, Michael. You had no business winning this one.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember specifically in preseason interviews asked about like, would you ever throw a comp? And I was like, no, the only way I would is if I were HOH and I had a backdoor plan and it came down to me and my nominees, and which is exactly what happened. But then I was like, I don't know. It was OTEV. I wanted to win. I don't know. It probably wasn't the smartest thing for me or my game, but also at that point, it was like, what's 4 wins versus 5 wins? Like, if I don't win this, it's not going to, decrease my threat level at all, I don't think. But I probably should have. I think it would have maybe, appealed to, Monty's or Joseph's comp. Not that I think, that they were like, had these big egos about comps. It sounds later on that Monty was getting really frustrated that he wasn't beating me and stuff. And maybe that would have helped to delay that or push that off. Even if he could always point to, well, I beat Michael in this veto, but who knows?
What are you going to do?
The what ifs.
Terrence,
it was also weird because Terrence on the last round, he was like, you need to win this. And I was just, I don't know. It was weird. And I kind of figured at that point he was going to ask me to, leave noms the same to try to get rid of Monty or Joseph. But in the split second, it was like, I don't know. I'm just going to try. Like, I don't want to throw this. So,
he throws it to you. I think you would have beaten him anyway, but he throws it to you. And then like everybody on the other side of the house comes up and pitches Monty. It felt to me like at this point, you were like, maybe Monty's not a huge threat. If they all want him out, maybe he doesn't have some great connections over there. And it seemed like you started to look at Joseph a little more this week as perhaps a bigger threat with all of these connections on the other side. He's going to start talking about these connections. Eventually, the 5 Swatters is going to come out of this week. And he's also getting close to Taylor. And so I think you kind of had been looking at Monty as like the big end game threat. And that viewpoint kind of shifts over to Joseph this week.
Yeah. Oh gosh, they were so transparent with their plan to get Monty up. I don't know.
This is a fun edit in the show.
Oh. And I don't know how much they really showed or like the timing, but it was less than an hour after the veto comp. I think Jasmine came up to me first and pitched it. And then Terrence comes up immediately after Jasmine and pitches it. And then I think Indy came up. Indy was the one person on that side who did not tell me put up Monty. She told me to, she was like, I'll respect whatever you want to do. If you decide you want to make a different move or a bigger move, I respect it, but whatever you want, I'll do it. So she was the only one who didn't really, but everyone then was counting her in their votes. And they were saying, leave Monty up. And we've got Jasmine, Indy, Alyssa, and I think Joseph, I forget who they all counted, but they counted out the exact same votes, every single person who came up with the exact same plan, all within the span of an hour, within an hour of the competition ending. I'm like, okay, this was obviously a very coordinated effort, especially when every single person the day before was telling me, yeah, get rid of Daniel. We all want Daniel out. But then as soon as the veto flips and there's a chance Monty could go, everyone wants Monty out. And so it's like, this is so obvious. And yeah, so I think that too, like, because I forget if it was at the end of week 4 or the beginning of week 5, but Monty had told us that he had been approached for an alliance with Indy, Jasmine, Monty, Joseph, and maybe Terrence. I don't remember if Terrence was involved in that or not, but and Monty came to us and told us that. So it was like, okay, obviously people on the other side of the house want to work with Monty and Joseph and not with me, but like, whatever, I'm not bitter. But Monty told us that and Joseph told us that. So like, okay, like they told us it. I'm not too concerned about it. But then when they all come throwing Monty under the bus, I'm like, okay, maybe they don't actually want to work with Monty. But it was very clear that Joseph had a lot of really good relationships. And at that point, Joseph was, bringing a lot of information back and forth. They were very clearly trusting Joseph with information. They were telling him a lot of stuff. They thought they had him, apparently, people were saying they had him wrapped around his finger, that he wasn't playing the game. He didn't know what he was doing. So, and we saw a very different side of Joseph in the HOH room when it was just the leftovers. He was very strategic. He was very, he would map things out and he always had a lot of input. So it was like, okay, like he is doing a fantastic job of convincing everyone on the other side of the house. He has no idea what's going on. He's just a number. He's just kind of, fun, goofy and whatever. And so I started to pick up that he was definitely a huge threat. It was like, he's got everyone fooled. Everyone loves him. And he's so protected on all sides. Like, even if he goes up on the block with his besties, he's not like, no, he's going to get 0 votes against him. And the other people are going to get votes. And it was just, very clear he was sitting very nicely in the middle. Everyone wanted to work with him. And I was like, I want to be in that spot, Joseph. Like, you're playing the game I wish I was playing right now. But because of circumstances, I've kind of been pushed into circumstances where I have to win. And he has the luxury of not having to win. And everyone still wants to work with him and loves him. So I was like, okay, like I see what's going on here. And even though, at first glance, people were more threatened by Monty because, he's tall, he's muscular, he's won an HOH. I was like, I see Joseph as the bigger threat for what the game is. Because I think there were quite a few people in the game who, not that they didn't understand the game or know what was going on, but really equated competition wins to best gameplay. And it's like, I know from watching the show that is not the case. And I think it's the social players and the people who give themselves the most options are playing the best game. And to me, that was Joseph.
Yeah. This is also, of course, when Kyle starts to approach you about a theory that he has. Now, this initially kind of pops up as a way to avoid touching the block because he's worried that the Alliance might turn on him. But eventually, of course, sort of develops into a larger game move in going in a different direction other than the leftovers, which is, of course, that he suspects that, Monty, Joseph, Taylor, Jasmine, Terrence, Indy, they all have similar whys for being here. It could be like another cookout situation. What goes through your mind when he says this to you?
Yeah. So the first conversation that we had, I just remember like, oh, like this is a red flag. I'm very uncomfortable right now. But there were, I don't know, it's such a complicated, it was just such a complicated time for me because we were having a conversation where this wasn't the only thing that he presented to me and then he left the room. Like, we were talking about a lot of other things and, about the leftovers, are we really going to make it to 7? And I remember talking about the alliance that I mentioned before that Monty and Joseph were approached for. And Kyle's like, they have other options outside of the alliance because people are trying to work with them, which I'm like, yeah, I can't argue with that. And if, shit hits the fan, they have a backup plan that we necessarily don't. So I understood where he was coming from that angle. Also, just with Joseph, it was clear that Joseph had really good relationships outside. And I remember we talked about how we saw Joseph as the biggest threat. And I was like, yep, I agree based on his positioning and what he's got going on in the game. So Kyle could have made all of those points without ever referencing race or the cookout or anything. And his points would have been just as valid. And I remember I did push back on some of it where I was like, because he was bringing up that alliance. And I was like, I do trust that Monty and Joseph are going to be more loyal to us because they did tell us about this. And, and we had all discussed that there'd be people that we would feel, or certain people in the alliance, it's okay if you don't feel comfortable taking this shot at someone else can do that. Or, so it was a little bit like, okay, well, we kind of talked about this, that, even if you think that race is going to impact decisions that, we've discussed that it's okay if someone else will say, I don't feel comfortable taking out this person, someone else can do it. So it was a little bit uncomfortable. It was like, I thought we'd kind of address this. As well as I think the thing that he said that really, I was like, okay, this, I don't really see anything. He said that, and I guess I don't remember if it was in this conversation or a future one, but I think it was this one, that Monty, Joseph, and Taylor within the leftovers were very close. And I remember pushing back because I knew I had a final 3 with Taylor at this point, and I did not see Monty, Joseph, and Taylor as a 3 within the leftovers. And I asked him, what examples do you have? I don't see them, because in my head, I'm like, I don't see them strategizing together, just the 3 of them, or, you walk in and they stop talking, anything that would lead me to believe. So I asked him, what examples do you have? And he didn't really have anything besides, similar whys. And I definitely, looking back, I, had that red flag. I should have just said something at that point. And so that's definitely a huge regret that I have, that I didn't shut that down right there in the moment. But, from what he was saying and how it was all, mixed in with like, okay, you have some very valid game points unrelated to any of this, but then you're bringing this in, which I don't agree with. And I think I just kind of froze up in the moment. And I remember he left and I was like, oh, like I feel awkward. I don't know what to do. And I remember talking, like rambling and venting in the DR. And I'm like, I don't know what to do here. And at that point, and I just like, I don't know what to do with this information, because from just a gameplay, it was like the leftovers. Okay, right now we're sticking together. I think that's what's going to happen regardless of anything. So like, I think I can still just do this week as we've all discussed, and that's not helping Kyle's plan or anything that he might be thinking of, or playing into his theories, because this is what we've discussed. And he's saying that we need to keep Daniel and Alyssa for our options, but like, I don't want to keep Daniel. So, I'm not going along with his plan. And in my head, I'm like, okay, like I've got this under control. I'm not going to let anything come of this. And that definitely, I don't think was the right thing to do. But in my head, I was like, okay, I've got it under control. And I, should not have tried to tackle this alone or kept quiet at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure we'll continue with that when we get to I think week 8. But in the meantime, we get to week 6, where Taylor is going to win the HOH, and this is the death of the leftovers. There's a lot of stuff going on, of course, with Taylor as an HOH, and the different kind of plans that she has for a little while. But sort of the point of it all is that after Kyle wins the veto, there's a new plan that gets kind of put into place, thrown out there initially by Brittany, actually, that immediately gets adopted by everyone. Like, yeah, Alyssa this time should be the target. The only problem is we got to convince Kyle to use the veto to get Alyssa up on the block. And you take this as an opportunity to further kind of drive a wedge in this group. You give Kyle a bit of a warning, and you ultimately kind of go back and forth saying, yeah, we should totally do this on one side. And can you believe they're doing this on the other side? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I did see this as an opportunity where I'm like, okay, I can play the middle here and kind of better my position within the alliance. So with the veto specifically, I do remember, so it's funny. So like with the leftovers, we would all naturally kind of stay up later. And so the people outside the leftovers would go to bed early, but it was very obvious that sometimes they would send like someone to babysit us. So Alyssa was usually the one who would stay up the latest of the other side of the house. So she would be in the HOH room. So it was kind of like, okay, Kyle will go and spend one-on-one time with Alyssa. So that'll get her out of the room, and then we can talk. So that started to end up biting Kyle, because he was not a part of a lot of strategy conversations, and the conversation where it turned to, let's use the veto to get Alyssa out, that was exactly what happened. He was, on Alyssa duty that night and had her out of the room when that was discussed. So I knew it was like, this is going to be horrible if Kyle comes in tomorrow, all 7 of us or 6 of us are like, you're going to use the veto to backdoor Alyssa. So I wanted to give him a heads up to be like, this is like what was discussed, because I did not want him walking into that and being like, we're all jumping on him and we've made this decision without you and you're going to do it and this, that, and the other. So I wanted to give him a little bit of a heads up, number one, so that he can think about like, what are you going to say? So you're not just blindsided by this information. And it was just like, on everyone else's part, I was just like, we were getting sloppy that week. And I was like, I tried to like kind of make mention of it. Like we were staying up very obviously, the 7 of us, a bunch of us go down at once, it was pretty clear. And then with this, I was like, this is just even sloppier, where we're going to like tell one of our alliance members what they have to do with this veto. And it's going to be a veto to use to get rid of, their showmance. Like that's not going to go over well. And so like at this point, like I'm kind of getting a little frustrated and annoyed with the leftovers, honestly, because we would make fun of the other side of the house and like how they kind of played sloppy and messy. And I'm like, we are doing the exact same thing. And I don't want to be doing that. But So I told him, number one, because I was like, you know what, maybe this can help soften the blow and give him time to think of like reasons. Because at that point, my ideal scenario for the week was noms stay the same and we keep Indy. I was like, maybe there's a chance that I can convince people that we need to vote Terrence out this week. So that's kind of ultimately where I was. But I was also like, you know, it's good for my game that Kyle and Alyssa as a showman stay in the house together as someone who's winning competitions. There's a chance that maybe someone wants to take a shot at a showmance before they want to take a shot at me. And then there was the thought, okay, if I kind of tell Kyle what he wants to hear, tell everyone else what they want to hear, that's going to cause some friction. And if the alliance is going to crumble, because at that point, a 7-person alliance, you know, Kyle has the veto. We know we're going to be 7 of the final 10. Things are going to probably start to crumble pretty soon, and people are going to be looking for their numbers within the alliance to stack their side. And hey, if they think I'm on board with them, that's good for me. So it was definitely a lot of positioning, telling some people what they wanted to hear, but also trying to keep people in the game that I thought, you know, if they won, they would maybe have my back. I didn't feel like I would go on the block if Alyssa won or if Indy won. And Terrence was just such a wild card. I was like, I have no idea what Terrence is going to do. He always talks about wanting to make a move, and who knows, maybe he'll decide that's me. But so there was a lot going on and a lot to consider that week.
Yeah, for sure. Something that came up a lot was that you and Brittany were very quiet in the public, in the big group conversations, especially like, you know, as things came around the pool table. And this is something that got brought up a few times during that week and then a few times after that week. Now, you know, in the end, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, the conflict exists and they have to deal with the conflict before they can deal with the people sort of profiting off of the conflict. But is this something you were concerned about? Like, what was your plan for these public conversations? Because it kind of felt like it was just like, oh.
Yeah. I knew that we would all get in a room and talk, and I can't say I want to, you know, do both of these things because that's not possible. So I think kind of what I relied on was like, I'd been pretty vocal that week that, you know, I definitely saw Jasmine as the biggest social and strategic threat on the other side of the house. I'm like, if anyone is putting things together and can rally people on that side to do something about it, it is Jasmine. Taylor said that she wasn't going to send Jasmine home that week, and that's fine. I respect that. But then I kind of used that as like a thing that I could fall back on to be like, you know, I've already made my, you know, self clear. I'd prefer Jasmine to go that week. You know, everyone else is kind of, it's a wash to me. So that's kind of what I relied on because I, you know, was consistent the whole week. I was like, hey, this is something I can say. It's not super committal. You know, no one can argue with that because that is what I have been saying all week. But I knew it wasn't a good or a really strong thing to say, but I was also like, I would rather people think there's a chance that I would side with them than to, you know, publicly pick one side or the other and then have half of the alliance know, yep, he's going to go with that side if it comes down to it. So I thought that would be the best option for me, even if it wasn't a great one.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, Kyle eventually, you know, is not going to use the veto. He is also a little bit concerned about the lack of support from you. But ultimately kind of comes into the next week again. He's got to deal with this conflict first. I felt like this upcoming twist, the split house twist, in some ways it worked out for you. In other ways, it kind of screwed you over. And that's because Kyle was kind of able to deal with Joseph and then kind of come away much cleaner than he would otherwise, and kind of like win more allies to his cause, and also like a week away from you, sort of come around on the idea of like, wait a minute, do I need Michael at all now that Joseph is gone? Whereas I think if you had been there the whole time, it might have been a different story. But obviously, you get there week 7, split house. HOH competition. I imagine you winning this was mostly just like, I need to be in control of this because this is wild.
Yep. And knowing you're in a group of 5, wild things can happen with the veto where people can be forced on the block again. So I'm just like, I want to win to keep myself safe and then have some control. And I did think, I was like, also like, okay, this could be a very easy week for me in that if I can send home someone outside the alliance and we come back and it's time for the war within the leftovers to start, I can point to my track record that I have always been, you know, on board and loyal. And I don't know, there's so many things going through my head in that yard. And it was, so I was just like, I just need to win and I'll figure it out later and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so so ultimately you go with I think a pretty decent layout here for what you're going for. You make sure to grab Jasmine as a guaranteed target. You then pull in Brittany and Taylor to keep them safe, and then kind of like Monty as a backup target, right? Mm-hmm. This is, I think, like a pretty decent pick. One problem that eventually came about from it is that it was too good, like and they eventually are able to kind of see, especially once they get some information from Joseph, that wait a minute, hold on, okay, so he picked Jasmine to target her, then his priorities were Brittany and Taylor, and this is again part of what is going to get the wheels turning for Kyle in particular. What I mean, I think I just went through sort of like the thought process at least a little bit, but were you thinking about anything beyond that initial pick? Were you worried about like, okay, this means I'm going to spend a week away from these people? Like what was going through your head?
Yeah, there was some of that standing there. It all happened pretty quick, so
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of time to think, but definitely I was like, okay, I know that I need to pick someone that I can target because I can't end up inside with, you know, 4 other members of my alliance and be forced to send someone home. Like they're going to turn and be like, why didn't you pick? Because picking first, I had my choice. I could pick Alyssa or Jasmine. So I was like, I have to pick one of them. And, you know, just from a jury management standpoint, I was like, I think Alyssa would be more hurt and upset if she knows that I picked her to send her home than Jasmine, just because at that point, Jasmine hadn't really made, you know, efforts with me to be like, hey, like we're working together in an alliance. You know, we had a good relationship for sure. And, you know, she told me that she like wasn't coming after me. We had those kind of conversations, but I had more conversations with Alyssa that I was like, it's going to be harder for me from a jury standpoint to send her home and maybe get her vote in the end. So I was like, I think I can send Jasmine home. And even Terrence, his part of his pitch the week before, because he had been up against Indy, was like, if I stay and I get to, you know, make nominations, I'm going to put up Monty and Kyle, and Alyssa would be my replacement nominee. So I'm like, okay, like Terrence has expressed that he'd put Alyssa up. I don't know if I believe that fully, but hey, that's an excuse that I can fall back on if people get mad at me for my picks and within the alliance, be like, hey, like sent Alyssa outside because Terrence had said last week he'd put her up. And then being final 5, I was like, all I need is 1 vote. And then if it comes down to, I can be a tiebreaker, get Brittany over here because I know she and I can get on the same page, and whatever we decide we want to happen this week, we'll make it happen. So that was my biggest priority, was, you know, get Brittany and someone that I can target, and then we'll see who's left. And then this, I think the mistake that I made here, I maybe shouldn't have picked Taylor next, but I was afraid, you know, that Terrence might try to send her home because she had just put him on the block the week before, and Brittany and Taylor were the 2 people that I was like, I am not willing to risk their games that they might go home if I don't pick them. So if it puts a little heat on me, I'll take it, but I'm not willing to risk their games at this point. So pick Taylor. And then I think my last pick was between Kyle and Monty. And I thought it would be better for my game to split up Monty and Joseph for a week, because everyone saw that they were very close. And I was like, you know what, maybe a week of them being apart helps me get closer to Monty, who is someone within the alliance that I trusted him, but we didn't have as strong of a game connection as I assumed he was having, probably with other people, because I was like, you know what, if you're not having end game conversations with me, you're probably having them with other people within the alliance. So let's put you in a position where, hey, this gives us an opportunity to have those conversations maybe. So I wanted those two separated so that I could work on that relationship. So that was kind of my thought process there in the yard. And I don't know, I think I made some mistakes there with my picks, but in the short amount of time that I had to make the decision, I was like, I think this, I came away with like, okay, this isn't bad for me. This isn't gonna, you know, I don't think anyone's gonna be too upset. Like, well, it turned out Kyle was.
Yeah, I mean, I think there wasn't a lot that you could do there that would have like changed the outcome dramatically and had a like similar results where you get sort of an optimal result in terms of who leaves.
I actually
it was just
wanted, if in an ideal, well, looking back, I think I would have done it probably differently. But as I was standing there, I actually would have preferred to have Turner instead of Monty, so that I was like, oh, I can put Turner and Jasmine on the block together. And like, that's an easy thing because they were the last two who hadn't been nominated at that point. I was like, I can take that away from them, take that off their resume. And I don't know. I thought, and it was like, okay, well, Kyle already thinks that Monty and Joseph are super close. Like it wouldn't be, you know, I don't see him joining that as a third person out in the yard. So I don't have to worry about within the alliance that, you know, them getting closer and that pushing me out farther. But then Terrence picked Turner as his first pick. And I think, you know, looking back as well, I'm about to go down a rabbit hole that we probably don't have time for. But I don't know. I think Turner was always a wild card and someone who I never really trusted. I think it would have been more beneficial for me to have him inside, but I didn't think Terrence was going to pick Turner first. So
yeah. Well, outside, Joseph is going to tell the players out there, yeah, Michael, Brittany, and Taylor have a final three. They pitched, or I was pitched to be a fourth in that. This, along with the choices that were made to split the teams, and I think just in general the distance, eventually gets Kyle to realize that you are kind of the big threat left after he gets Joseph out. Inside, you're going to target Jasmine. Things go very smoothly. Again, for the second time, Monty's going to spend a good portion of this week having conversations with both Taylor and Brittany about targeting you. But you do make kind of like a final four to final five deal, depending on if Joseph is still around. And ultimately you decide to not target him. This one I was a little more torn on. I felt like targeting Monty could work, but with so much uncertainty of what was happening outside, I could see why you might hesitate, especially if, you know, given what was happening outside, theoretically you might need Monty there as a shield, because if Monty is gone, then Kyle really has no reason to not target you. Ultimately, that doesn't work out, of course, as the second the house reunites, Monty's going to kind of go upstairs and rat out everything that happened inside. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up the final four, final five thing, because that actually was a huge red flag for me to have someone sit there and be like, this is my final four. But if Joseph comes back, then we are a final five. It's like, okay, so you're telling me in that moment that this is not your priority. This is kind of a backup. So I was like, okay, I don't like that. But I think, it just, for me, I always looked at it, and this is kind of my philosophy on the game. And I kind of mentioned it before. Like, if someone isn't having end game conversations with me, they're probably having them with someone else. If someone is not approaching me about working together and alliances, they're probably having those conversations with someone else. And there really wasn't anyone outside of the leftovers that I was having those types of conversations with that I felt good enough to take out someone in my alliance and know that I have backup. So it was like, Jasmine, I think keeping Jasmine probably would have been really good for my game. Especially if what she told me after the game was true, and that she really was not targeting me or any of that. And who knows what would have happened if she had stayed. But I just didn't feel, it was like, okay, between Monty and Jasmine, at least I have, you know, this alliance with Monty, this final four deal now. If I take him out, you know, I lose that. I potentially have people who are mad at me coming back in. I can't play HOH next week. And then I don't know if I can count on Jasmine to have my back. And at that point, you know, her foot still was not 100% if it is a physical competition. You know, there were some competitions like, I don't even know if Jasmine will be medically cleared to play in this competition. And it's like, there was just so many risks that I didn't think it was going to be worth it. But I think if Jasmine and I had connected earlier in the game and had actually had some real strategic conversations, because at that point too, you know, she was a big part of forming the 5 Swatter Alliance, which happened, you know, 2 weeks before that I wasn't included on. So like, you are including people in my alliance, in other alliances. And at this point, I found out you've approached Monty and Joseph and Kyle. You know, at some point, I'm going to realize you have to think, I know I'm not a priority for you. Even if you say we're good and you're not coming after me, we're still not working together, you know, in alliances. And I find out you're approaching other people for alliances. It's hard for me to take out someone in my alliance to go with you when I really don't know, because a lot of the times when I had talked with Jasmine, you know, it was when I was HOH and she would come to me and say like, I would never target you, but I wasn't getting those reassurances when I wasn't HOH. So it was like, okay, is this just kind of a convenience thing for you? Or I don't know. So I think if Jasmine and I had more productive strategy conversations earlier, I may have taken the shot because I would have felt like I had someone to back me up. Whereas my fear was if things didn't go well outside, Jasmine is going to link up with Alyssa and Terrence, who I now have spent a week away from. Joseph and Kyle, or whoever comes back, Turner, they're going to be mad that I took out Monty. So what's going to stop them from going there? And Kyle had already talked about, you know, I think that, you know, when it comes down to it, if the 7 isn't going to make it to 7, people are going to want to go with easier competitors that they can beat. So it's like, okay, well, Kyle, you've already had that logic applying it to other people. What's going to stop you from being like, well, hey, actually, I can do that same thing. I just spent a week outside with all of these people. I have a showmance with Alyssa. I have an in over here. So it was just a lot of risks. But, you know, hindsight being 2020, I should have just done it because I won the veto the next week in the following HOH, and I could have salvaged whatever situation I found myself in. But at the time, I thought that it would set me up best for success and give me the most options moving forward to leave Monty in the game so that depending on whatever happened outside, I always had, you know, something to fall back on and say, you know, I did what we said we were going to do. You can trust me and have those options, but didn't work out that way.
Well, Kyle is going to come back in to the house. The house is going to reunite. And he's going to say, let's go to war.
Let's go to war.
Let's go to war. And it's a split house at this point. Turner, though, wins the HOH. Mm-hmm. And that is bad news for you because Kyle is going to make sure that Turner is going to be targeting you.
I remember as soon as my first DR session after Turner won, and I was just like, this was worst case scenario. I thought it was like, Turner is... I never really trusted Turner to the full extent. And so when he won, it was just like, who knows what he's going to do. And yep, he turned on us. And the funny thing too, is Turner is such a bad liar. He was super calm and chill. And, you know, but when he lied, he would talk really fast and say like, well, I'm going to do this because, and it's just like, okay, you're clearly lying. And as soon as he won that HOH and then he came back in, I was alone in the back bedroom and he comes in and he's like, dude, you know, like I trust you and Brittany more than anyone. I'm so glad they're all back together. Like you're good for the week. I'm going to put up change. It's like, I didn't even bring any of this up. You just came and started dumping all this on me. And that was like red flags. I was like, uh-oh, like something might be up this week. But I was like, you know what? But I was also telling myself, okay, why would he come up to me and tell me he trusts me, all of this and everything that he said is like, it makes no sense for him to do that right now, especially to come up to me and say that. Like, sure, if I corner him and approach him, he's going to lie and say what he needs to say. But why in anyone's right mind would they just come up and start lying for no reason? Like, that's stupid, especially when he's HOH and I have no power. But you know, that was another mistake. I think I expected people to behave logically.
Yeah. Well, he is going to target you, and you are not pleased with Kyle because you can sort of tell that Kyle is behind this. And you had a conversation with him where you were like, listen, Kyle, it's it's pretty great that nobody said anything about the things that have been said, right? I mean, obviously Brittany and I know things, and you know, we haven't said anything, and hopefully you haven't said anything, and you know, hopefully nobody says anything.
Oh, about when did that happen? I remember talking about like the leftovers and that it hadn't been spilled. I don't remember.
So this is sort of what I'm asking, which is that like basically the conversation, it was kind of like and maybe I should have pulled the exact quote, but I think it was something along the lines of like obviously you were out there, we don't know what you said, we were in here, we haven't said anything about what we've talked about, you know, we haven't said anything, or at least that was the implication. And you know, you like, I don't like, hopefully you haven't said anything. And it seemed to me like or it seemed I think to people reading that conversation as potentially a kind of like, hey dude, I know things about what you've been doing. Don't be doing anything, especially in the context of you having conversations with Brittany about like, should we reveal this information?
Yeah. I don't remember ever feeling that way. I know there were times like, because Kyle prior to the split house had been, you know, saying like, oh, if it's a double, like maybe I take a shot or something like that. I remember that, and you know, like just him talking about the you know, possibility of turning on the leftovers before 7. I don't remember ever like, you know, veiled threats like, oh, like I don't ever remember bringing that up with Kyle in that context. And but who knows? I
think it was, I think it like, I can believe that because I think it was subtle enough that like, you very well could have been talking, I think, just like about the leftovers in general. Like it wasn't like a huge thing. But I think that again, sort of like because of the context surrounding it, I think people kind of were like, okay, well, maybe this is what he meant. But it sounds like perhaps not. So ultimately, though, you do have these conversations with Brittany about like, should we reveal this information? You had talked with her a little bit in the previous week as well about like, should we really reveal it now? And then as sort of like things are progressing in the week and it's clear, you know, Brittany goes up in the block, it's pretty clear that you're the target. You have more of those conversations, you win the veto, and you start talking about like, okay, let's actually make this happen. Can you tell me about the thought process that got you there?
Yeah, and again, it's just like my mind was, I don't know, in turmoil. It was like a blender going off in there. There's just so many things to think about, and and I always approach everything, you know, from a game standpoint. I understand that people are, you know, like I look at things a little differently, I think, than people. So when I was like, okay, if we share this, everyone's going to be skeptical because we are in a game. And I understand that. And no matter what information comes out, people are going to think, what's in it for you? Why are you doing this? X, Y, and Z. So like, I knew there was going to be pushback on us for sharing. And my biggest fear, honestly, was that people were going to think that we just straight up made this up. And it was like, we were going to get destroyed. And I didn't know how Kyle was going to react, because Kyle very easily could have said, nope, I never said any of that. They are lying. They're doing this, that, and the other. And who knows what people are going to believe in the game. You know, as much as you expect things, you know, people to be rational when you are in the game context, there's a lot of money on the line. You never know what people are going to think. So that was the one thing that I was like, okay, I'm afraid that this is going to happen, that people are going to think we are just straight up making this up. And so that was kind of, that did go into the decision about when we shared as well. So because up until, I would say, the end of week 6, that was when Kyle had made some comments that were more concrete, that weren't necessarily based in game. When Brittany had approached him about, you know, I want to pause and let's look at this. And, you know, I wasn't there for the conversation. I don't know exactly what was all said, but was not receptive apparently. So that was pretty much when we're like, okay, like this is what we think it is. And, you know, we probably, you know, at least for me, I probably shouldn't have waited that long even to fully make up my mind. I had that red flag from the first conversation. But I also come from the background where I am a live feeder. I'm on Big Brother Twitter. I see the Facebook and I know exactly how people are going to get ripped to shreds. And I'm like, if I am wrong about this and I put false information out there that is going to destroy Kyle's life potentially, I wasn't comfortable, or I didn't feel like I had enough information to do something like that at that point in the game. And, looking back, I think that was an error in judgment and I should have trusted my gut. But I come from a background where I've seen all this happen, and I've seen people's families get death threats, and people try to get Big Brother fans are crazy. They're crazy. And they will try to get people fired and do all of this kind of stuff. And it was just like, I didn't want to be the cause of that to someone else, unfounded, or not that I want to be the cause of that to anyone, but if that is going to happen, and that was kind of part of my mindset that was weighing on me. But once we figured it out and then we get split up, I'm like, okay, there's a chance that he just goes home, the game takes its natural course, and this isn't information that has to become part of the game, because if he's out, that's it, that's done. And I think that was another mistake that I made, where I was like, I think I mentioned it earlier, I was like, okay, I feel like I can handle this. I will make sure that, I will take out Daniel to, knock down his plan of using him as a number for this. And then, the next week, Taylor won HOH, like, okay, like it's not happening. Kyle's not going to convince her to do anything. So I'm like, okay, we're fine. We're on track. Like, it's not going to impact the game. If he thinks these things, that's on him, but that's not what I'm doing. And then like, maybe he'll go home. And so he doesn't come home, or he doesn't go home, comes back in. And that's when I, realized where I made a mistake, because Turner does one-on-ones, probably has like a 45-minute conversation with Kyle, has like a 5-minute conversation with everyone else. And then, noms go the way they go. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, I don't know what was being discussed up there. I don't know if Turner is agreeing with what Kyle is saying. And it was just kind of like a panic. Like, I should have said something sooner, because I think now maybe this is affecting this week. And I did think that there was a good chance that I was a target, but I was also like, there's a good chance that Monty's a target. And then it became a point where it was like, okay, well, now if I say this, well, of course, how convenient you bring this up that you just got blindsided after I get picked for the, well, how convenient that you bring this up right before the veto comp. And then it was like, once I won the veto, I'm like, okay, perfect. Nobody can say that I am bringing up this information to save myself, because I am already safe. There is nothing that Turner can do to put me out of the game at this point. Nobody can question. Well, apparently they could, but in my head, I was like, nobody is going to think that I am sharing this information to save myself this week, because obviously I cannot be evicted this week because I have the veto. So that was kind of some of the thought process in behind, when do we share this? And then once we were like, okay, this is information that we're going to share. I remember like, I wanted to talk to Monty and Taylor first, because again, coming from the live feed background and seeing what people say, it was like the second that Monty or Taylor brings up race, like, people are probably going to just, they're going to get ripped apart, because, they're doing this, they're doing that. And, the people who are like, oh, Big Brother and reality TV is too PC now, all this. And it gets really ugly. It gets really, really ugly. And so I didn't necessarily feel comfortable pushing them into that, especially because the information was so tied into the game and the leftovers. It was like, and at that point, like, I thought Terrence and Alyssa probably knew about the leftovers, but everyone was denying it, saying, nope, they don't know. If we out this information, that's also going to out the leftovers. That's going to blow up people's games. And so like, I wanted to talk to them and see, like, this is what's been going on. Is this something that you are comfortable with me sharing? And if they had said no at that point, that would have been the end of it. I would not have brought it up. And that's not to blame them. I'm not saying it's their fault that I said anything, but I didn't feel comfortable, putting them in a position that could have been ugly within the game and without the game, and just throwing them into that and being like, well, sorry, no heads up. I'm just going to do that. So I wanted to have that conversation with them first. And then was kind of like, okay, this is information that should be shared, especially because at that point I'm like, okay, like, you know, everyone knows I'm going to use the veto on Brittany because Brittany is my number one, and Monty's going to get put on the block. It's going to be after Kyle has been talking to Turner at all hours of the day, all the time. The final nominees for the week are going to be Monty and Taylor. And in my mind, I'm just thinking like, I don't necessarily know what's being said behind closed doors, but from the information that I have and what I'm seeing happening this week and who the final two nominees are going to be, this looks bad. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I can say something and it's probably going to, you know, there's going to be pushback and blowback. But if I go out of the game and I don't say anything, I'm going to regret that way more than not saying anything at all. So I said, you know, I have to speak up now. I know I probably am doing this too late, but it needs to be done. And of course, and I know there's going to be people out there who think that, you know, it was only for game, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I considered what the game ramifications would be and what that would look like. And yeah, and Kyle going home for my game was not a bad thing. So I can't sit here and say like, oh, I didn't even consider the game or think about that at all. Obviously, I did think about what it would look like, but there were so many other factors and so many things that were all considered that, you know, I'm not going to, you know, sit here and say, oh, I never thought about the game at all, or I only thought about this or only thought about that. I considered everything and took it all into consideration, had conversations and like, okay, what's the best thing to do? And that's where I landed. And especially because like, I didn't know if Turner and Alyssa were approached in the same manner that Brittany and I were approached in. And it was like, I know I would just be sick if that happened to me and I was in that position and someone was assuming I was going to go along with this and for whatever reasons. So like, okay, maybe they don't even know, or maybe they do know and, you know, they're a part of it and fully in. I didn't really ever think that was the case, but like, I think they deserve to know. This is information that I think should be shared right now. And that was kind of like a little peek into my mind, and that probably hardly even scratched the surface there. But I think like the main thing that I recognize, you know, from talking with everyone, I obviously should have handled the information differently from the very beginning when I had it. I think it was a big mistake for me to think that I've got this under control, I'm not going to let anything happen, and that me as one person, when there were still 11 people left in the game, was going to be able to fully control, you know, what happened there. And, you know, and ultimately, like, I think I just should have been better prepared going into the game. Like, how am I going to handle that if this happens? And I think kind of what made it a little more difficult for me was at the beginning, it was, you know, obviously the insinuation was there. It was never like a full explicit, let's get all the white people together and do that. Cause like that explicitly, I know I would be like, no, but like the way that it was discussed, like, and, you know, and I sometimes like, I don't know, I don't exactly know how to talk about this as sometimes without like, I'm not trying to paint Kyle as, you know, these were his intentions. This is what he wanted to do. This is how he thinks or feels. Like from my perspective, this is the way that I viewed it. But, you know, I think the way that it came in, that it wasn't so explicit, and how it just kind of over the next week or so, by the end of week 6, when conversations were a little more explicit, still not fully saying, you know, all white alliance or anything like that. It's like, okay, like, I think things are confirmed. I think I should have just trusted my gut from the beginning. And I definitely recognize that I did not handle it the way that I should have. But in the end, I would rather have said something later than not said anything at all. So I am glad that Brittany and I did say something, but I know I could have handled it better.
So it kind of like, from what I'm interpreting, I think you're saying that like when you first heard it, it felt like, okay, this is, you know, a thought process that he's having, like a theory that he may have, but it's not clear like what that means that he might do moving forward, or how long he'll hold this belief. And then the following week, when he's starting to actually pitch the people, which you know, that first week when you talked about potential people, it did include Taylor, because you were pitching like, I think Taylor is actually with us. But then the following week when he starts pitching like, okay, you, me, Brittany, Turner, Alyssa, that's when you're like, okay, this is moving from potential thoughts to potential action. that is going in a very wrong direction. Is that sort of what sparked that sort of like really like, okay, this is really not what I'm thinking is good?
Kind of. I will say, from the conversation that we had, on my HOH week, like I definitely could see where his thought process was and where maybe it could go. But I was like, okay, like I'm going to bring up the fact that, Monty and Joseph told us about this alliance that lowers my concern that I have, pushing back on saying that Joseph and Monty and Taylor were super close and kind of being like, well, I don't see it that way. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of expressing that I don't necessarily agree. And, looking back, I should have just flat out, been very explicit. But so I think especially the following week, and again, where it gets complicated is that, Kyle, Brittany, and I did have kind of a 3-person agreement. So like, okay, the 3 of us working together, I get that. Alyssa is Kyle's showmance, and I think maybe they were officially boyfriend or girlfriend at some point in the season, not to diminish whatever they had. But so like, okay, that makes sense that he'd want to work with her. And he's saying that he's super close with Turner, and he's been saying that for a little while. Like, so take race out of it. I see that there are non-race factors that would lead you here anyway. And, that's not assuming there are no unconscious biases or anything else that are playing into that. But, just on paper, I can see where you got here. I don't want to do that and go forward with this as a group because, Brittany and Taylor were always my people in the game, and I was never going to go against them. But, oh, shoot, I had something and it's gone. Shoot, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So there was another conversation that Kyle had. I think it was maybe that conversation that prompted Brittany to have the more in-depth conversation. But we're out at the hammock. And, we're talking. It was after Kyle already had the veto. I don't remember if it was before or after the veto ceremony. But he said, he was uncomfortable, or not necessarily uncomfortable. And like, just kind of a disclaimer. I'm trying not to put words in Kyle's mouth. The things that I remember that he said, I will say, but the last thing I want is to misconstrue anything that happened in there. And this is very much,
it's difficult to remember exact quotes. Yeah.
The one thing I do remember that he said, he was talking about Taylor's HOH, and that, Taylor said that she doesn't, as a Black woman, she doesn't want to send another Black woman home on her HOH, specifically, given the history of the game and everything. And like, I understand that. Not mad about that. Kyle did say, and I specifically remember he said, like, as a straight white male, and then to paraphrase the rest, like, if that is going to be a factor in decisions, that kind of puts me on the bottom of the totem pole if comes into it. So like when he specifically said, like, as a straight white male, that's when it was like really like, okay, the alarm bells are going off. And that is like not, like what I was kind of concerned about. I can definitely see this moving forward. And then couple that with all of the other, who he's pitching could work together, or saying that the other 6 people could be coming together. That's when it was like, okay. And there again, it was an opportunity that I should have taken to shut it down immediately. I think I just kind of froze up. I didn't know exactly how to handle it. And then I'm really glad that Brittany did have a more explicit conversation with him. And then, we talked about that and we were like, okay, yep, this confirms everything that we've been thinking. And then, we go into split house, and that kind of throws everything off. But so I don't know. I think I should have trusted my gut is what it comes down to, that I did recognize that. And I should have been better prepared and more equipped going in about how do I approach this should this situation comes up. Because obviously watching the cookout last year, that was one of the things I was concerned about. That was like, oh, not that a cookout would happen, but that the white people would say, we need to, squash this before it's an option. And so, like for the first couple of weeks, I'm like, good, like that is not coming up. That is because that's not something that I want to be associated with, be a part of, or deal with in the game. Let's just play the game as 16 individuals. But, unfortunately, things went the way they went, and I should have been more prepared for that. But, and so that's where one thing that I know that I saw, there was a clip floating around of Kyle and I talking the day after. And so, because I remember I had been asked a little bit about it, I think in some of my exit interviews, and I was like, gosh, like I remember talking to Kyle about, you know, our position within the 7, or are we going to make it to the final 7 as the leftovers, this, that, and the other. And then like to come out and people say like, Kyle directly asked you about his cookout theory. And then I watched the clip and he said, you know, am I overthinking what we talked about yesterday? I was like, okay, well, and then when I saw that, I was like, okay, I know exactly like where, like, yeah, if you watch the clip of him explaining just that to me the day before, and then that next clip right after, I'm like, I completely see why people are like, you know, see it the way they see it. And like in my head, I'm remembering that we talked about, you know, this, and this the day before. And yes, that was one of the things. And then when we talked the next day, asking me, you know, what we were talking about yesterday, you know, we talked about a lot yesterday. And I remember thinking in that, or not in that moment, but like thinking, oh, I'm glad that Kyle is talking to me about, you know, when do we turn on the leftovers, or at what point do we take a shot within the because it's like, okay, good. Like you are thinking of these conversations, including me in those end game plans. That's good. So like, I remember saying like, I'm glad that we're having these conversations. These are things that I think about. Like and this is a hill that I will die on. I never once was in there thinking, oh, I'm thinking the exact same thing. I'm glad Kyle voiced that about, you know, a potential cookout or something. Like, no, I definitely know that was never my thought process. My thought process was what happens at 7? What do we do when we move forward? So, but again, I think what it boils down to is intent versus impact. My intent in that conversation was never to encourage these ideas. I think the impact of it is that is maybe what happened. I think Kyle did think that I was on board and I was validating what he was thinking. And I, you know, again, I own the mistake that I should have just shut it down immediately, because I think that could have been the end of it. So I definitely obviously have to take responsibility for that. I just know that was not the intent that I had, but that's definitely, I think, the role that I did play in it. And I, you know, recognize that was a huge mistake. And I definitely know now in the future, like I need to just be straight up explicit about it. I think sometimes, you know, I'm not a super confrontational person. So it's for me, I'm like, okay, like if I say this in my head in like passive aggressive Midwestern speak, this means this. Like was definitely not the right way to go about it. But
have you had conversations with, I mean, I'm assuming you have, like with Taylor, with like other people, because it felt like throughout the season, as we saw more reaction of what happened, it felt like most people had at least some concern about the timing. Have you talked with everyone about it? Do you feel like those conversations have been productive?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I definitely had a lot of those conversations in the jury house. You know, outside of the game, I guess I haven't had a conversation with Taylor about it. We talked about it in the house. I'm not sure. It sounds like the feeds were down quite a bit during that time. So yeah. I don't know if it was seen or not, but you know, and it's definitely something where it's like, I'm willing to own up to my mistakes. And if anyone wants to have more conversations, especially because I understand that as you get more information and see things and clips and episodes, that maybe new questions come up. Those are conversations that I'm willing to have for sure. But I know like in the jury house, had a lot of conversations. And I think part of the reason why maybe I got so much heat is that I mean, obviously, you know, for what the situation was, I get that. But also like, because I was like, okay, I understand why people are going to be skeptical. I think sometimes that comes off as, well, you know, like, why isn't he defending himself? Why is he not saying this? It was like, I like fully understand and respect if someone has questions for me and wants to ask and is, you know, not happy with something. And I think sometimes that can be interpreted as like, you know, oh, like he's very nonchalant about this. Like if he really, you know, he would defend himself harder if he, you know, thinks he's completely innocent or, you know, whatever the case may be. But, you know, it's definitely something that I understand. And like, especially as a white person, I don't get to tell anyone how they should feel or what to feel. Even if I'll explain, this was my thought process. These are the conversations that were had. This is what I was thinking. This is what I did. This is why I did what I did. If I explain that to someone and they are still upset with me or angry or have anything to say, like that is something that I will take, that I will own. So it's not my place to tell anyone how to feel about this. I'll explain my side of things, but any conversations that anyone wants to have further, if they see anything new, like I'm more than willing to do that. But definitely talked about it in the jury house. It was a heated entrance, to say the least.
All right. Well, of course, this all culminates in Kyle's eviction. You win the following HOH, and this is your third HOH, your third chance to take a shot at Monty. This was the week for me where I think I was the most just like, dude,
Yeah.
you're right there. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You decide not to target either Turner or Monty. And I think that from what, I was able to gather that week, Monty, a big part of that was not wanting to lose Taylor. A big part of that was, that you had developed a decent relationship with Monty, especially during Brochella. And with Turner, what you said to Brittany at least was like, yeah, I don't want to punish Turner for making the move that he did last week. I don't want to go back on that deal. So are those the reasons? Was there more to it? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think all of that is part of it. So with it was like I knew that Monty probably was going to come for me at some point. One thing that I was concerned about, and again, this goes back to kind of like similar to the week I took Jasmine out, is like I didn't have anything from Terrence or Alyssa or Turner really. I mean, Turner did a little bit. That it was like, okay, if I turn on Monty, I know I have this backup and this solid group that I can count on. Like I didn't have any of that. So it was like, okay, so I can turn on the person that I've worked with longer, or I can, try to and go forward with these people who have given me no reason to believe that they will actually have my back, and who I think were all part of wanting to backdoor me last week, or I can try to stick it out with Monty. And, and part of it too was that, I don't know, and I say this, with peace and love is what we always said in the house when we were about to say something mean, maybe, but with peace and love, nobody was going to take Terrence out. Everyone wanted to sit next to Terrence in the final two because Terrence would have been a very easy win. And that's just, and Terrence very much says that anyone sitting next to him, he would have out-talked and would have won the game no matter what. But, I digress. But it was turning into a situation where if someone does not take Terrence out, one of those final two seats is already filled, and everyone is going to be trying to get there with him. So it was like, I guess I'm going to be the one to do it because I'm in a position where if I lose a competition, there's a very good chance I'm going home. If I'm sitting next to Terrence, I might as well not even bother. I should just pack up and walk out the door because no one's going to vote Terrence out over me. If I'm sitting next to Monty, Alyssa has expressed to me that, from very early on that she wants Monty out of the game. I was like, there's maybe a chance if I'm sitting next to Monty on the block, I have an argument to stay. If I'm sitting next to Terrence, I have no argument to stay. Like no one is going to keep me over Terrence. Whereas with Monty, there's maybe a chance. And especially, and Terrence was saying, he's like, I'm going to go to the jury and I'm going to poison them against you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I can use that to my advantage, where if I do end up on the block and we're getting close to the end, I can point, hey, I've got someone in there who is actively campaigning against me. Maybe it's a shot, but I knew it wasn't a good shot, but I was like, you know what? It maybe gives me an option. And if it works out, that is a huge thing I can put on my resume and be like, I had 9 comp wins and they did not take the shot when they had, it was like, I don't know. I knew I was in a bad position. I ultimately think that even if I had taken out Monty, I still probably would have gone home in the double eviction. Even if I had taken out Turner, there was a good chance I still would have gone home in the double eviction. So like that makes it a little easier to swallow. I don't think I was making it through that double, but that was kind of some of the thought process. And it was just like, I don't know. In my mind, I don't know why people didn't try to come and pitch alliances to me. Turner did after the veto. After I didn't use it, this guy's alliance, which I was like, there's not
The gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, not a chance in hell I wanted any part of that. But it's like, hey, if you win and think I'm all in on this, sure, go for it. But no, absolutely not.
They seemed to be into that for like at least a couple days before Monty kind of realized, wait a minute, what am I doing?
Yeah, and I think from what I've seen, like a lot of that credit goes to Taylor. That Taylor really did a good job of downplaying, you know, that the women were not working together, even though there were pitches for, you know, the three of them to go to the final three, and kind of have me on as a fourth, from what Brittany was telling me. So I think that was a brilliant play from Taylor's perspective. So I'm gonna give her a lot of props for that.
Would it be fair to say that two key elements you were missing that week were, one, just how much you didn't have Taylor anymore, that she was willing to turn to you, and then two, how sort of close Turner and Monty were at that point, how loyal Turner was to Monty at that time?
Yeah, so I didn't know that Monty and Turner had a final two, but I assumed that they were pretty close because Turner's game, you know, he started off, he was attached to Pooch. As soon as Pooch left, he attached to Kyle. Once Kyle was gone, it was like, okay, like the next alpha that you're going to attach to is Monty. And Brittany was very perceptive on that. Brittany like called that like immediately. She's like, yep, like it is those two now. So I think I knew that they were close. I think the biggest thing, and I don't know why nobody from Dyer Fest ever came up to me and said, Monty came to us immediately after we came together. Like, I don't know why they protected him, but I mean, it makes sense, especially with Turner, because Turner was very quick to throw Terrence under the bus. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know why they protected Monty the way they did, but that I think would have changed a lot.
And he again was talking about targeting you that week with multiple people who all could have told you that it was happening. Just never happened.
Like, and I knew that from Brittany that Monty had thrown my name out there, but I was like, okay, at this point, everyone has thrown my name out there, so you know that's kind of a wash. But
so, okay, sorry, but that was another thing because from Brochella. Monty had talked with Taylor about targeting you. Taylor goes to Brittany about it, says, no, Brittany will totally be chill. She even has a conversation with Monty specifically. It felt like she did bring this up to you, but very sort of vaguely at the time. And then when she's later trying to convince you, like, hey, you need to take Monty or Turner out, it seems like she's giving you more, but she's never, to my eyes at least, like explicitly told you, like, dude, Monty's been talking about taking you out for weeks, like incessantly, because she had that information, but it never seemed like she was like giving it fully to you. Is that right, or did that happen and I just didn't see it?
I don't remember exactly. I know Brittany did make it clear that Monty had thrown my name out, and maybe that was just me being like, I've made up my mind. I'm not having this conversation anymore. Me being stubborn, and I will fully admit that I was wrong and I should have listened to Brittany more. But she definitely did bring that up. I think that I don't think she brought it up in a very, like, for me, I describe myself like I'm kind of like a harsh truth person. I would rather you just tell me, like, Michael, you are being so stupid right now. You are making a big mistake because X, Y, and Z. And I feel like Brittany's a very respectful, level-headed person, and like she wasn't going to come at me like that. And I wish she would have. And I probably should have told her, like, hey, this is how I operate, and this is like, if anything happens, like, just come at me straight and like don't try to sugarcoat it, or like, you know, because I would rather just know, because, you know, kind of like I talked about earlier, I think something that helped both of us, we were very self-aware, and like we can recognize when like we're making a mistake, this isn't the right thing to do. So I think if she had been a little more forceful, I think that would have maybe helped. I don't know for sure. You know, it's easy to say woulda, coulda, shoulda, but she definitely did express to me that Monty had thrown my name around, and more so in more of a way than just, you know, oh, Monty would be okay with it, but like, and definitely like, oh, Monty's like so mad that you're beating him out and all this stuff. I remember that a lot more than, you know, specifically about targeting me or trying to get me out, but that he was really frustrated that he wasn't winning stuff. But I think she did say it. Maybe it just wasn't on the feeds or in the episodes, but I definitely, you know, Brittany was right. That's what I will say. I think Brittany deserves some more credit than she's gotten.
Well, you get to the double eviction, and Doesn't work out. The veto doesn't work out. We noticed that the belt seemed to break. I've been told that you were warned about the belt potentially breaking. Do you think that if the belt had not broken, that you could have won that competition?
I don't want to confirm nor deny anything that could make CBS mad at me. So all I'm going to say is that things definitely did not go as planned in the veto comp. From watching it back, I was in the lead. When things didn't go as planned, it definitely was a panic for me because I was like, what do I do? I don't know. And it all fell apart from there because that was definitely my thing going into competitions was like, just stay calm, stay focused. And it definitely did not work out that way. So I tried to recover the best that I could and keep going, but it's hard to say for sure. I do think I would have had a good shot at winning it. Just kind of look because I did watch that one back and I did see that I was in the lead. So I definitely think I could have won that, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, Monty's going to convince Turner to put you up on the block, and you campaign pretty hard against Brittany. This was something that was kind of interesting throughout the season, is that she did reveal to you her real profession as a hypnotherapist. And your response was, man, I wish I had a comparable secret to tell you. Never told her. Is that in part because you always had it in the back of your mind that you might reveal this if you needed to, or did that just kind of come out in the moment? And it just in general, what was that relationship like?
Yeah, so I actually, honestly, the double eviction was so chaotic and wild, and I was like, I have 5 minutes. I never actually wanted to reveal that. I knew it wasn't going to help me. I think like I think I was talking to Alyssa, and I was just like, I need her vote. What I just spill, and then I was like, she's lying about whatever and at that point, whatever conversation Brittany had with Turner had told Alyssa, and Alyssa was already like distrustful of Brittany. So I was just trying to like reinforce, like, yep, like yeah, she's lied, like this, and then it just kind of like spilled out like in a panic, and I regret saying that. That was not something that I would have even needed to do. I knew, like, yeah, it's information that maybe makes people look at her differently, but it's not, game altering. I'm going to keep Michael over Brittany because of this. So that was a panicked mistake I shouldn't have done. I always knew going in, I was like, if I'm going to lie about something, I am going to stick to it. I'm not going to, so like when I'm telling people what my job is, like that is my job, and I will go home still saying that is my job. And it wasn't so much, and it was more so kind of the opposite. I never wanted to give Brittany that ammunition that she could potentially use against me. Because in my mind, I was like, I said it so much in the house, like, I don't really care what anyone's job is outside of here. I mean, obviously, like I care, but like it doesn't matter to me in a game context. What I care about is, can I trust you? And like, do I think you'll be loyal to me? So to me, I didn't really think that people lying about their occupation was really that big of a deal, unless someone told me they're like a human lie detector or, something like that. But, the fact that Brittany works as a hypnotherapist or a clinical hypnotist, like I was like, I think that's really cool. Like that ultimately doesn't change how I feel about you, or even the fact that you were hiding that. I don't really care. That's fine. I still trust you. So but I was like, I don't know, with my information, it's like, it could be. And people in the jury house told me, like, when I came clean, they're like, yeah, like you made the right call not saying anything to anyone about that, because that definitely would have put an even bigger target on you. So I don't regret not sharing it. I do regret saying that thing to Alyssa in the double about Brittany's job. And I felt bad about that, but because that wasn't information that I was ever planning on really needing to use. Because I was like, there's so much other stuff that Brittany and I have talked about that I could use rather than she lied about her job. But, in a panic and in the moment when I'm like realizing I'm going home, I'm like, I don't know what to do.
So I have another question. You get evicted. Brittany goes on for a little while. She ultimately is going to compete in the Final Four veto. And it's there's days involved. And she has a day wrong. She's been studying it wrong for a while now. And I kind of jokingly came up with a theory about like, yeah, I know she studied with Michael a lot. What if Michael implanted an incorrect day on purpose, in preparation for his betrayal or not betrayal, but like to haha, I got you beat. It genuinely was a joke. But then Brittany on the feeds was like, yeah, Michael told me that was the day. It's
No, I would, as much as I love a good villain, and that would be a very villainous thing to do. No, I never was. With other people, I may have done that, and I definitely, when people would ask about like, oh, what day is it today, or what was the name of that comp, I would always play dumb and like, oh, I don't know, I don't remember. Like with Brittany, because I knew, like, I trusted Brittany 1000%, and I was like, if we're in a position where number one, like, it's because we've seen before where there have been HOH competitions, like, did this happen before or after, you know, step up, step down, things like that. That I was like, if I'm not playing in that competition, I want Brittany to win that. So I need her to have all of the right days. So I was never going to try to throw Brittany off from studying. And that's one of the things too that kills me so much about going out in the double is that if I knew I was going home, or even if not, like I would be like, Brittany, you and I are sitting down and we are studying and we are going over everything day by day. Because if I'm leaving, I want Brittany to win these mental comps, and I'm going to make sure that she knows all of that. So, you know, it just so unfortunate, like, you know, and also just like, oh, to have a week to campaign, I still don't know if I would have been able to pull it off, but I would have had a much better chance than just, you know, 5 panicked minutes. So to go out in a double was like worst case scenario. And then even it's like, okay, if I'm going home, at least I can set Brittany up, and I didn't even have an opportunity to do that. But no, like I never would have fed her wrong answers. And oh, it killed me so much when she came out on stage and like for the round table, and she showed us like, yeah, I don't know if it made the episode, but you know, like like I could tell you what happened, but why don't I show you? Like they did a little thing like that. And so we saw it, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, all it is pictures and knowing what day it is, and then math, like and you get a chalkboard for it. Like, oh,
it was
gosh.
one of the more fair Final Four vetoes in a while. It was not very physical,
which I love. And so this is, I'm going to have like my nerd moment for a second. When they asked us in like our preseason stuff, like our favorite competitions, I was like, my favorite competitions will always be like from the early seasons, the Final Four, where it's like the logic puzzle with the faces and the like, I loved that one so much. And now it's like, everyone knows to study the days. Everyone knows that. Oh, apparently everyone does not know the days. I have watched that one, and I was like, oh, that kills me, because I don't know. It was probably on the feeds. Like I would lay in the bathtub and study and run through days. And it was like, I could have knocked that out super easily. And then especially just doing math, like I did a math minor in college, like there's no calculus, no abstract algebra, it's just addition. Like, oh, that was made for me. So like, oh, to see that one hurt. So like, oh, I would have had that.
Talk to me about your jury experience. You know, from like just, you know, people coming in, you getting there, and then, you know, ultimately the vote.
Yeah. So I never wanted to set foot in the jury house. So it wasn't a bad experience, but I think in my mind, it was always like, I could be here or in the house. And that kind of like tainted it for me. It was like, I wish I was in the house so bad. So it was hard to like really enjoy it, but, going in was rough. And I don't know fully exactly what Kyle explained about, you know, the situation and his eviction. But I definitely don't think it was, you know, the full picture of everything, and like fair, like, you know, he doesn't know exactly what was going on in my head. And it sounds like, you know, things got really heated when he revealed the information, and things were kind of like he was really walking on eggshells for a lot of the time when he was there that week prior. So I don't know what opportunities he would have had to fill people in, but so it doesn't sound like people really had any idea about my side of things, except that Michael knew this information and didn't tell anyone, and then told in this last week. So I think that's pretty much all people were under the impression of. And I guess he told Jasmine that I hated her, which I was like, absolutely not. I do not hate Jasmine. Obviously, there were times like petty roommate stuff that Jasmine would do that annoyed people, and we would talk about it and complain. But so like I went in, like people were not happy. I mean, they were like I think, happy I lost, but like not happy to see me. So that was rough. And you know, like when we do the like let's watch the footage, I remember like the HOH competition, like the Zingbot puzzle, I think, because Terrence was there too, so we were watching all of that together. Like 10 seconds into the comp, like we pause, and then everyone just like comes at me, which like, and I'm not mad at anyone for that. Like, I understand from the information they had, from what the situation was. I get it. There were questions, and people had things to say to me. So like, I was fully expecting and ready to go in there and talk about everything. So because I think Indy was the first one. She was like, you know, like I can't hold it in. I just have to get all this ask about all this. So I'm like, okay, yep. Like people are like, I don't know. Poor Terrence. Like Terrence didn't get his moment to be like, you know, my downfall and let me tell you my story. Blah blah blah. It was very
he didn't get his opportunity to poison the jury.
No, he didn't have to. But so I took that time. I explained, you know, and it was a lot of, you know. And I think it doesn't help too in the jury. Like people get information and then they sit there for a week and there's no new information coming in. They can't ask questions. They can't do anything to verify. So when I'm there, there's a week's worth of stuff that people want to ask me and talk to me about. And so it was a lot. Like there were probably like 15 questions in one rant. And I'm like, okay, like I don't want to interrupt you and like tell you to be quiet or anything like that. But also, like, I'm going to forget all these questions that you're asking. So, like, whenever there was a pause and I would try to answer what I could, and then there'd be more questions. And then, you know, I'm talking about the situation, and then all of a sudden, Jasmine's like, and apparently you hate me. And I'm like, what? Like, where did that come from? Like, yeah, like within the game, like, we obviously weren't working together. And there were times that we would complain and whatnot. But it was like, I never wanted, and I remember even saying, like, because I never wanted it to be construed that I didn't like Jasmine as a person. I would always say, like, as a person, I love Jasmine, or outside the game. Like, I think Jasmine and I will be friends, like within the game, like this, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But so like that, like blindsided me. And I don't know. So there was a lot of questions for me, and it was definitely heated, intense, but like, there were so many things, like, especially being out now, they'd be like, oh, there were so many fights. So like, we did not fight. Like people had questions for me. People obviously were very passionate and had a lot to say. We did not fight. Like I answered questions. There was a rumor that Terrence like punched me or something. I was like, no, there was no physical like altercations.
Was there a shoe throwing? I think I heard.
So Indy had planned, no matter who came around the corner, she was going to shake her shoe at them. So she did that. And like, I don't know, but no, she didn't throw her shoe at me. She shook it. And like, it was funny, like whatever. But, so yeah, there was no fighting. There was definitely like obviously heated conversation, but I would never say that we fought. There was the stupidest rumor. Someone said that Indy was making up lies, that I was saying like racist stuff about Brazilian people or something. That never happened. Indy did not make up any, like, number one, I never said anything like that. Number two, Indy never made up any lies to like about me or my character, anything like that. So I don't know where people were getting this information, but none of the like spoilers from the jury house were true. Like, yeah, tensions were, you know, high at points, but it was never like personal attacks or fighting or physical violence, anything like that. So I think everything was, I don't know, people want drama, and sorry, we didn't deliver that. But yeah, so that was a lot to walk into. But like pretty much like right after that, it was like, okay, like let's go show you the jury house. Like here's this, here's that. And everyone was, you know, cool. Like nobody like treated me differently or like rudely. Nobody, like everyone was kind to everyone in that house. And like, I don't know. I think I give them a lot of credit for that, because obviously it's a situation where you're now having to take my word for what I'm saying happened or didn't happen. And like, that's not easy to do with the situation. So I have a lot of respect for everyone who was in the jury house and how they handled situations. You know, I think there were a lot of people who were hurt by, you know, my actions in the house. And, you know, I feel very grateful that they gave me an opportunity to apologize to everyone and to, you know, get to know me outside of the game. I think that was probably the best part of the jury house, was getting to talk to people and, you know, without thinking about the game and like, you know, is this person only talking to me right now because of, the game and because they need something from me. So it was actually, an enjoyable experience with the people in the house. Like I definitely wanted to still be in the game, but can't really complain about that. And I think part of it too is just, a lot happens and it's a game that's very stressful. There's a lot of money involved. Like I got yelled at when Alyssa came in the next week. She got ripped to shreds just for like game stuff, but they came at Alyssa very hard. And then it's like afterwards, like, okay, like let's go inside. And it's, so from that perspective, the welcome into the jury house was not so good, but my time there with people was enjoyable. And it was good to kind of like decompress and get to talk about the game as well. And, see all the mistakes I made. But,
yeah. Was there ever any doubt in your mind and just in general that if Taylor was sitting in the final two, that she would win? One of the questions I think I asked you was like, who do you credit more? Whose game do you respect more for taking you out?
Yeah.
The people that put you up or the people that voted you out? Because you had it in your speech. You were like, this is not your move. This is their move. And I kind of wanted to know how true that was and if that would carry on to the jury, because I can't ask specific questions about who you'd vote for. Yeah. And so I think there was a little bit of uncertainty. I think I ultimately predicted that you would land on Taylor. But there was a little uncertainty about like, how much of a guarantee was that? And then in general, we've heard at this point that by the time we get to finale night, things are pretty locked in for Taylor. But was that always the case for both you and the house, or was it a little more of a journey?
Yeah, the jury was always very pro Taylor. Like from the moment I stepped in, everyone was very pro Taylor, which I was like, oh, good. I'm happy about that. But from my eviction, I still do. I give, back and forth. Like knowing what I know now, I do give Taylor a lot of credit for convincing Monty that like the girls aren't tight, and because from what it sounds like, Turner did not actually want me to go home in the double at first.
No, I mean, yeah, it was his idea to make the deal in the first place, and then Monty had gone to him to be like, if we have the shot, we need to take it, and he agreed. But then in the moment, he was kind of like, but really? And Monty to be like, yeah, really?
Yeah. So I definitely so leaving the house, I definitely felt like Turner and Monty, I gave the credit to, because it was like, yep, they were the ones who pulled the trigger. Voting someone out is, yes, you are part of the move, but, if I don't know that you've influenced the decision, I'm not going to say, well, because someone voted me out, they get the credit. I'm going to say, who put the pieces in play to make that happen. So I did, leaving the house, I was like, okay, Turner and Monty, I do give the credit to. From the goodbye messages that I got the next day, Turner was saying, oh, I didn't want this to happen, this, that, like took no credit or ownership for the move. So I was like, okay, like I give Monty full credit for this then. Like he used the veto to push Turner into doing something that he didn't want to do. Like, even if Turner had said like, I didn't want to originally, but then, when the opportunity arose, I thought that was the best move. But no, it's like, take no credit. It was like, I have more respect for that than to be like, well, someone forced me to do this thing I didn't want to do when you did have another option you could have put up. So I definitely gave the credit to Monty. Now, looking and seeing everything, that Taylor was the one who really convinced Monty that, the girls weren't, going the three of them together. And I think that is a big reason why, if he did feel that way, there's a chance maybe he would have let me slide one round, maybe not, but it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So, especially if Brittany would have been the one to go home, which I don't necessarily think she would have, but if she did, and knowing that like my number one is now gone, where am I going to turn? There's a chance. So I definitely give Taylor a lot more credit than I did initially. And nobody, because the only people that came after were Alyssa and Brittany, who weren't in the room when Taylor's trying to convince Monty that I, need to go, or that the girls aren't working together. So looking back, I still give Monty a lot of credit, but I definitely give Taylor a lot of credit as well. So to the two of them, and but yeah. That'd be where.
So yeah, in terms of like where your vote was at the time, were you already leaning toward Taylor? Did you know you would vote Taylor in the finals? When did you make that decision, and when do you feel like the jury in general locked that decision in?
Yeah, so I was very pro Taylor my entire time in the jury. I would say the moment Taylor for 1000% had my vote was when Brittany walked out to the round table. Because if Brittany, won the veto to save herself, and if she would like won at Final Four and sent, Monty or Taylor home, who were probably in my eyes, like the two biggest moves she could have made at that point. And if she had won the final HOH and like brought Turner to, it was like, there was a lot, like, even though there's only 2 weeks, there was a lot Brittany could have done, I think, to gain a lot of respect. And like, obviously I knew Brittany's game from the beginning. And so like, I knew that she was very strategic. She was very thought out. And so like, oh, and if she can do these other things, like and that was more so like that other people maybe could have been swayed. Like it would have been very hard for me not to cast a vote for Brittany, just knowing the game she played. But I also, was very pro Taylor. I was like, oh, I also really want to vote for Taylor. So like between the two of them, like as much as I wanted to see them in the final two together, I would have been like, oh my gosh, that would have been like ripping my heart out picking between the two of them right now. But so once Brittany was out of the game, it was like, okay, Taylor's got my vote 100%. But yeah, and it's funny because I think, a lot of people from what I've seen were surprised that Taylor won 8-1. But in my mind, it was just like, well, obviously, like, yeah, I was like the only vote that might not go to Taylor is whoever comes out in third place. But, I think Taylor just played such a different game from what we've seen. And I think it kind of goes back to something I said earlier, where a lot of people look at competition wins as equating to the best game player. Like, okay, if you have more wins, you played a better game. And I don't think that's the case. And I think that Taylor was very influential without having power. Because I look at a lot of the moves that I made, and a lot of my HOH decisions really benefited Taylor more than they did for me. And there were considerations that I made, like, I don't want to take Monty out because I don't want to push Taylor away. And I think that really speaks to her social game and how she, started the game. And I don't even fault her for being targeted early on, because all of it was made up and it was people dogpiling on someone for the simple fact that they probably didn't want to be the first person to go home. And so like, okay, this is an easy thing that has presented itself. And I don't know. I think everybody shared information. So, if Taylor shared information that Paloma said, I'm not going to hold that against her, because everybody has shared information that other people said. So I don't think that Taylor, by faults of her own, really put herself in the position that she was in week one. Everyone was looking for something to point at someone, and I think that, she recovered so well. And like, I don't know, she just went from everyone wanted her out to people at the end, like, why aren't you taking a shot at her? Like, you have it. And nobody did. And I think that also played into it, that at least while I was in the house, I recognized that Taylor was a big jury threat. I was like, with the way that she has played this game, her social game, her strategic game, the way that she can deliver a speech, like, have we not all seen that? Like, she is going to win against anyone. And I think the only person that I really talked about that with was maybe Brittany, because I was like, I wasn't going to be the person going out there trying to paint the target on Taylor's back at that point.
You did say it to the cameras too. You were like, I don't think I can beat Taylor. Yeah.
And I think I was right. I think the jury would have voted for Taylor over me. And it was just wild to me that nobody else saw that. Brittany, I think, recognized it as well. But Monty and Turner, I think they both thought that they would wipe the floor with her. And I'm just like, please keep thinking that. Like, in the jury, I'm like, please keep that mindset. But I don't know why. And there again, I think it goes back to, understanding the game, and that it goes up beyond just competition wins and being self-aware, whereas like, okay, I'm going to admit, like, I don't want to be the person who brings someone to the end because I, boosted my own ego so much that I thought that I would win no matter what. Like, I'm going to look at it objectively, like, who's on the jury? What has this other person done? Like, who is in the jury campaigning for them and who could be influenced? So I don't know. I think that some people made a mistake.
Well, speaking of competitions, as I brought up at the beginning of this, you broke some records. You broke the veto record. You tied the single season total competition record. This was something that I was tracking pretty closely by the end. For years, I've been pointing out, oh, they're close. Nope, they didn't make it. Like, oh, they're close. Oh, no, didn't make it. You ended up with the exact same amount of competition wins and losses as Janelle in season 7. And these are the exact same percentage of wins. Obviously, you have more veto wins than HOH wins. So the composition is a little bit different. But first of all, how do you feel about that? Especially as somebody who came in saying, "What would Janelle do?"
Yeah.
Now you are right there with her in terms of competitions. How do you feel about that?
It feels it feels good. I'm not gonna lie, but it's just crazy to me. Like I never thought that was going to be the case. I never thought that was going to be my journey or my path in the Big Brother house. Like I don't know. And I think maybe like that's something that I learned. Maybe I shouldn't sell myself short, but there were so many competitions when we walked out into the yard, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the first veto, I was like, this isn't for me. Like, or I don't know. And maybe it was like that. I was so like I never wanted to get in the mindset where I felt like so confident and like overly confident or cocky where I was like, I'm just going to win all these competitions, that I would always think about like, okay, who else would be good at this and and I think maybe I was, not giving myself enough credit that I should have. But yeah, it's crazy. I never thought that would happen. But it felt really good, especially because I don't think anybody else would have expected that from the beginning of the season. So it's good to show people, to prove people wrong.
Yeah. Well, are you somebody that like, are you somebody that feels like you do well at random like games and stuff? Like, is that something that you're like very used to, like winning things? Did you come in feeling like that? Like, even though you didn't come in wanting to be the competition person, did you come in thinking like, yeah, I could probably do decently because I've done well in my life? Or is this kind of like a shock to you?
Yeah, I thought that I would hold my own in competitions. Like I was like, I know there are gonna be some that I probably have no chance at winning. Like that hanging bar one the first night. I was like, oh no, this isn't gonna go well. But I think I don't know. I said it. I remember saying it to Julie. I was like, why did I say this on TV? Or I don't know, maybe it was the Instagram one after. But I was like, Julie, like I was a weird kid. Like I would make obstacle courses in my backyard, and I had a stopwatch, and I would time myself, and I would, I just like did like weird things. So like I grew up in like a very like it was pretty rural when I was growing up there. So like I didn't have neighbors. So like so it was just me and my sister. We would just have to make up like random games to entertain ourselves. And so it was just like these weird things that have absolutely no translation to real world skills, or very helpful in Big Brother apparently. So I think that was a big thing, that it's just like I've always liked doing weird stuff like that. And I think too, doing things like, like a lot of my hobbies are like playing board games and doing escape rooms and like nerdy stuff where it's like you use your brain. And I don't think you realize how much of these competitions really are, about, assessing and strategizing in the moment. And that's like, okay, well, that's what I do for fun, is stuff like that. So like when I'm in a competition and I'm watching and seeing like, what are people doing that's working? What are they doing that's not working? Or, just constantly analyzing the situation. I think that's really what helped me the most, is just thinking things through. And, especially like doing escape rooms, you're trying to like win these things or do these tasks, solve these puzzles under a time crunch, which essentially that's what you're doing on Big Brother. The time crunch is just how fast the second fastest person is doing it. So I think that kind of helped me a lot. And I don't know, I'm glad that it did.
Well, okay. So I would say, so apart from like actually studying the competitions and practicing the competitions themselves, and apart from like trying to get more physically fit, which I think are two very obvious ways to train for competitions, what's like the biggest thing that you would say, like if somebody were to like, hey, I want to get on Big Brother 25, I want to be a comp beast, I'm going to study the competitions, I'm going to practice the competitions, I'm going to try to get more physically fit, what else should I do to prepare? What would you tell them?
Ooh, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to how you perform under pressure. And I don't know if there's a way that you can teach that or practice that really, but it's not getting flustered. Like, I'm trying to think, like in the wood stack competition, I think I watched it and they didn't show, like, I dropped a piece, and like, rather than like freak out and like panic, it's like, okay, like it's fine. You know, just take a deep breath and keep going. Like, you're fine. So staying calm under pressure, I think, is probably the biggest thing. I don't know how to teach that or give advice on that. Maybe book a virtual hypno session with Brittany. I bet that's something that she could help you with staying calm and centered and focused. So I don't know. I think that's the big thing, because being able to think quickly on your feet and adapting when things aren't going well or switching things up is really important, and just staying calm. Because the second you freak out and panic and tell yourself, like, I lost, I can't do this, you're probably right.
How much do you wish that you just went ahead and went ahead and won that, I don't remember, the Brochella veto that you threw?
I would actually love to talk about that one, because I watched that one on TV and I was like, they left out, because like I've had so many layers of strategy for that one. So I will say that a lot of people are like, well, you threw that. I did not throw that one to Brittany. My goal for that competition was for Brittany or I to win, because I was like, if nominations change, I'm going to be forced to put Taylor up, which is gonna, and I think Taylor knows that she definitely did know that Brittany and I would have stuck together. So like, why show her at final 10 that I'm gonna pick Brittany over her? So like, letting Monty or Jasmine win that veto was like, absolutely cannot happen. And then and within that competition, I was like, you know, round one, you never stay round one. Like, unless you are like, I know this is the answer, you do not stay round one. Because like, what is the point in knocking yourself out the very first question? Get a sense of how people are doing at this, who's going to play aggressively, who's going to play conservatively. And especially, it was like, if Brittany and I are the only two people who stay and we knock each other out, like, it's pointless. So I knew I was always going to throw round one of that veto, no matter what. So then I was like, well, if I'm going to throw it, I might as well try to throw people off and make them think that I'm bad at it. So I'm going to purposely write down a much higher answer than I actually think the answer is. So I did that. And then I think the second round, I don't think they showed it, but we all folded on round two. And it was because Brittany had one. So Brittany had 1 point. And then the rest of us were at 0. And I felt really good about my answer, and I would have won. It was the pieces of sushi. I don't know if you saw that there was a table of sushi. And Monty and Jasmine both put 300. Brittany put, I think, like 225. And I think I put like 265. And the answer ended up being like, I think 249 or something like that. But in my head, I was like, okay, if Brittany and I stay, one of us, and I felt really good about my answer. Like, okay, if Brittany and I stay, I knocked Brittany out. Well, now I still only have 1 point. Before, we were at 1 point collectively with 2 of us against them. Now it's going to be 1 point, 1 versus 2. So that doesn't make sense. And if Monty and Jasmine had been closest, both of them would have gotten a point. And it was like, so it was just like so much. There was like, the safest thing to do is just to fold, because, and I was like, if Brittany gets, I thought that Brittany might be closer, but I didn't know for sure. But so I was like, I'm just going to fold. And we ended up all folding. But I was like, it's way too risky where I could knock Brittany out and then we're in no better of a position. And now there's only one of us against the other two. And they only have to beat me in 1 round. And then, I don't know. And then the gummy bear one, I really did not have a good guess on that. Well, I mean, I guess I ended up having a good guess, but I did not feel confident. And I think part of it too, it's not just about like, you know, it's about reading other people. That is a very big part of that competition. It is not just about your answer. It's, what do I think this person's going to do? What do I think that person's going to do? Am I going to knock out this person who I don't want to knock out? And so I give all the credit to Brittany for, you know, realizing and reading the situation right, to know when to stay, to know when to fold, to get those points. And then when it did come down to us on the last one, like, she had a better guess. So like, yes, if I had stayed or been more confident and been less worried about knocking Brittany out, I think I could have won the veto. But ultimately, that's not the position. And I give full credit to Brittany on that one. So.
Have you seen that somebody did the math, at least based on the ones that were shown in the episode, and calculated that you performed better than anybody has ever performed in that competition in terms of the guessing of the numbers?
I saw that, and that is crazy to me. Like, I don't, you know, like those games that you play when you're a kid, like guess how many pieces of candy corn are in there? I never won those. So I was like, I'm not going to win this one. But I don't know, something happened and I pulled it out, or I've had some good guesses. But I don't know.
There you go. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up or address?
I don't know. I think the only other thing that I'll say is that I've seen some people talking online that the jury was persuaded to vote for Taylor. Absolutely not. And like I said, going in, everyone respected Taylor, and she had fantastic jury management. She had really good, like, impactful goodbye messages. She made people feel good walking out the door, and she played a great game. Like, there's nobody told me that I had to vote for Taylor. There was nothing in any of my exit interview questions that made me feel like, oh no, like if I don't vote for Taylor, people aren't going to like, no, like I think it's just, I don't know why anyone wants to make that claim, but I think some people are bitter and don't want to give credit where credit is due. And I'll say, like, and I said it on to someone else, my vote for Taylor was not a vote against Monty. I still think Monty played a good game. Like, I've, you know, obviously seen some people aren't super happy with him, but from a gameplay standpoint, I respected the move he made to take me out. I respected a lot of his game moves. I think he made a big blunder at the end by taking Taylor. And I don't think he, you know, had as good of social bonds as people with other people that Taylor did. And I think, you know, never underestimate the power of a social game. As well as the influence that Taylor had. I think, you know, so I just want to make that clear. I voted for Taylor to win. I never voted against Monty. I never voted for Taylor out of any other reason than I thought that she truly played the best game. And it's funny. She said, we talked and she was like, when you put your key in, I'm voting for the strongest player. Like, I just assumed you meant Monty. I'm like, no, like, you played the strongest game. What the strongest game looks like to one person doesn't mean it's the strongest game to everyone else. Like, there's so many different criteria. Brittany actually put it perfectly at the round table. She's like, there is no rubric where we assign points for this, for that, we total it up, and that's our winner. Like, you, as a juror, you vote on, you know, what you think makes up the best game. And, you know, the way that Taylor played, I thought was the best game. I think Monty played a good game. I thought Taylor played a better game. And no comment on Turner. Just kidding. No, I will say, because I feel like I have kind of said, like, oh, like, yeah, Turner had no shot of winning. He made it to the final three. There is something to be said for that and the moves that he made and the navigation. So, like, I will never say that Turner played a bad game, but Turner definitely missed some opportunities to, you know, manage the jury. And, but, you know, I think all three of the final three played good games. But Taylor, I think, played the best game.
There you go. Well, Michael, thank you so much for giving me so much of your time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk Big Brother. So very happy to share it all. Thank you. I know I ramble. You're getting an insight in what it was like for the DR. I would have like a question and I would talk and be like, what was I saying again? Like, did I even remotely come close to saying what I needed to say? But like,
it's that's what they need. They need more. Although I guess that's not what they need actually.
Yeah,
they
I know. I feel bad
for
whoever who had to go through my DR session to be like, how do we pull something out of this mess? Like, you know, you only get like 10 seconds per confessional, like on TV or whatever. So like, oh gosh, like, and the way that I explain things, that's why I think part of me is like a little nervous to watch it back, because I'm like, I know so much just logistically had to be cut out for an episode to be 42 minutes long. So like, I don't know. It's like, oh no, they missed everything that I meant there, or I don't know. We'll see. I know I'll watch it back, but it's going to be sad. I know my full thought process and strategies there's no way that they can show all of that.
Yeah. Well, how can people find you if they want to maybe hear some more of your thought processes on social media?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. It's my first and last name, Michael Bruner 01, the number 01. And then on Instagram, I think it's Michael Bruner 3, the number 3. I don't know. I'm going to try to be better about being on social media. Before Big Brother, I was not a social media person at all. So I'm going to try to maybe post a little more, be a little more active. But I said that, and I already like still have not gone through all of my messages from the season that I got from people. I'm like, oh, I meant to do that like weeks ago, but it's a lot. And I'm not a super social media person, but I'm going to try to be a little bit better about it, because I always know I like to keep up with my favorites after the season. So if anyone cares, you know, expect a lot of cat content, I guess. So
good, solid stuff. I also had an experience with the cats at Todrick's house.
Oh my gosh. When I got there and found out there were cats there, I was like, this is the best thing, because I've been asking for cats for like the past 100 days. So, and they're
so sweet.
They are. And I know some people don't like hairless cats, but they were so sweet. They jumped up on my shoulder and so cute.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, thank you all so much for joining us here today. You can, of course, find me over on Twitter at Armstrong Taran, or on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong, hanging out, watching shows, good stuff like that. You know, I'm sure we'll have a little bit more of this Big Brother postseason coverage as we close out the season. But until then, thank you again all so much for joining us here today. And I will see all of you next time.